be a variance in terms of the rotational speed. That right there, he said, alone ends the debate, which I agree with, because if you have different rotational speed, right, if you don't have 15.04 degrees per hour everywhere on Earth, then what's actually rotating is not the Earth. Something else is causing that precession.
Now, you're familiar with the terms Occam's razor? You know, you understand that philosophy? Where if you have two different sets of facts that point to the same conclusion, but they are diametrically opposed each case, it's the one with the least amount of, the simplest one is probably the best one, or it's probably the truthful one.
Least among number of assumptions, I think, is
least number of that's thank you. I knew, yeah.
If
so
you get
what happens there? I'd like to look at that and check the math if I could, but that would be my civilized way. I'd say, okay, you found what is potentially Nobel Prize winning data here, so let's check it. Let's get a few people to check it and see if they all come up with the same math as well. And those who don't come up with the math or come up with math that's correct, we can't attack them. We've got to look at it and say, well, where's the error?
No math to come up with. It's just it's literally just taking measurements, bro.
Yeah, like if you were on the ground, like let's say if you were on a globe that was if you were on a globe that was rotating and you're right at ground level and you're measuring that, you know, let's say 15.02 degrees an hour, if you were to go up to a top of a mountain, it should still be 15.02 degrees an hour because you're on a ball. So it's sort of like the idea of like an hour hand on a clock. The interior part of the hand that's right near the center and the outer part of the hand are all doing the 1 hour. The whole hand is doing the hour. So it shouldn't be different. So the thing is, if it is different at higher altitudes, which this is where we need to replicate Dayton Miller and a lot of these other ones, but replicate what Bob did as well. I know there were some refutations to what Bob did. There was claims that, you know, temperature and there's a whole kind of discussion around it. And I wouldn't say that what Bob did with that was necessarily completely conclusive. I'd like to see it done more times and more variety. And even Bob admitted that too. He was like, we need to do this more and so on. But if there is a different reading at the higher altitude, that would be a major problem for the globe idea, because that would mean that there's a different rotation at a higher altitude, which there shouldn't be if it was the globe proposition.
There's multiple papers that show that. They're
Well,
Russian.
hang on, no, there you go. Where are these? Because that is extra confirmable data. Now you need to produce that, because Bob's one measurement is just an assumption. If we can find different sources of the same conclusion, then this is potentially Nobel Prize winning, because you have found something. Now, I'd like to check those papers.
Who gives a fuck about the Nobel Prize, though? Okay, Boomer.
Like, we'll have to get all the aircraft checked as well, right?
Well, that's irrelevant. I'm telling you how big it is.
No, I agree with you, but Boomer.
You're saying it's huge, and I'm saying it's huge too. Now, I want to check the math.
But think about it like this, Boomer. Okay, just think about it like this. Okay, let's just say that we are correct, that there is an ether wind or an ether wind or an ether flux, whatever, which means that there is an ether, which means where would that lead to? Okay, let's say we actually do prove it 100%, right, that there is an ever pervasive substance called the ether that's imperceptible to the human senses, but we can actually utilize it and, you know, harness it for our own, you know, whatever we need it for, right? Why would we need to pay electricity? Why would we need to actually be, you know, what, like, who's to stop anyone else to create some type of etheric weapon? Whatever. The people who are in power cannot let this information out. Period. It would change the paradigm and their power structure completely.
I don't think so. What they would do would change everything we know about physics. And it would end up with a Nobel Prize in science. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but a Nobel Prize is something that is accepted culturally in a lot of ways. Now, that could probably be debated. There might be some Nobel Prize where they claim it was a breakthrough, but there's a certain approval that goes on with a Nobel Prize. There's a lot that goes on. There's a whole sort of political and even like, I was going to say kind of aristocratic, but there's this sort of hierarchy of academia and what's accepted in science. And I'm not saying that it's completely shut off to something that would question the paradigm, but something like this, that would be this transformative in the whole nature because of the way with gyroscopes and the claim of the motion of the Earth. I mean, right now the governments of the world are on board with telling us we're on a spinning ball, like the WGS 84. So something that would challenge it at that level. I'm not sure. Even if you had all that data, even if you had an independent research team, you spent all the money, you got all the data, I don't think the scientific world is just going to, with open arms, be like, yeah, let's change the whole paradigm tomorrow.
If that was the case, Dayton Miller would have won a prize. Dayton Miller did over 100 experiments. At first, they said the same thing. Oh, it's because of temperature. Oh, it's because of this. So he was, he controlled for every fucking variable. They still hand-wave dismissed his work, bro. Like, it's all published. They pushed him to the side.
They had to.
I don't think that's the reason. I think the main reason is that the evidence for it is not strong enough. That's why. Yeah, it hasn't. It's not because of the regime, which all
papers,
Stefan? Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
So you're saying that that's not enough evidence? 500,000 different measurements throughout different times of the year with different environments and different altitudes.
Consistently the same measurement, repeatable, replicatable, observable, over and over again. They just hand wave this, push them
and
to
then
the
it
side.
matches like a sinusoidal pattern.
Yeah. So why hasn't so why hasn't that been done with a conclusion, a good evidence and conclusion where they're using modern technology?
Because there's a philosophical impasse that the scientific community has about Earth being in a special place in the universe.
So science is denying to do this tests because there's already like a regime. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay, so if you were to accept the results of Dayton Miller and of Michelson Morley as results rather than just nulls, then Earth's not moving.
There are results, yes, but as you said, null results, basically.
Can you accept in your mind Earth being stationary?
No.
Exactly.
The reason is there's too many evidence showing that we're not stationary.
Yeah, like what?
Well, hang on. We just went past before when I mentioned the Nobel Prize. Okay, I was saying it's extreme. You then took a hell of a leap into the direction of it's all being covered up because the government's not comfortable. Now,
no, not the
you
government.
might find evidence of times where the government has lied, and there's times where medical science has been wrong, but I still got cataract operation done and I can see. So sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But for that, the way you leapt away from that, here's my basic thing. The first thing I ever thought of, on a flat Earth, the higher you go, the further you can see. And if I had a telescope here in Australia, I would be able to pull back Polaris back into view with a telescope, which I cannot do. That was my first ever argument, and no one's ever answered why I can't pull Polaris, the Northern Star, back into focus from here in the Southern Hemisphere. And the reason is we're on a spherical Earth. So if you could answer that to me, I would jump over. I would jump ship for sure. You know what I mean? If I was satisfied with that. Thank you.
Check this out. Yeah. There's two arguments, right? Motion and shape. And these have been like the core, questions that people have asked about the cosmos for, millennia probably, right? Which is, what do we live on, and is it moving? Right? Now, the question of is it moving only became substantiated or as like as an actual thought based off of the stellar aberration that was picked up by Bradley. If you go back into the history of the stuff, right? So there's a thing called stellar aberration that was happening in all of their telescopes all across the world at different times of the year, and it was consistent, right? But who's to say that stellar aberration was even substantiated to begin with? Because if you look at the time, who manufactured the lenses? Who manufactured the telescopes, right? There was this overwhelming scientific consensus at the time, if you look at like their letters between each other of these different astronomers, saying we need to have a standard of using the same telescopic lens, the same methods, the same techniques, and we need to get a standard going, essentially, right? To make sure this stellar aberration exists, right? Then that's when you get the papers of Arago, and then George Bedell, Airy, right? Airy's failure, and then you get people like what was his name? Oh, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, look,
Blinker
sorry, dude, you're dragging me into the weeds again.
Yeah.
Why is this becoming? You're dragging me off into the weeds. Why can't I pull Polaris back into view with a telescope? That's all I asked, and you went straight into the weeds again.
Oh, I didn't even hear that. To be honest.
Oh well, why can't I pull Polaris, the star, back into focus in the southern hemisphere?
But as you said, a stellar aberration and some type of lens. How many different types of lenses can we use today compared to what they did? We could use radio astronomy for the same kind of thing. So saying it's the aberration is based on some sort of lens that creates it. That's not totally true.
That's not. Well, I didn't get to finish my point, but what I'm saying is because of the possibility that there could have been errors in the instrumentation that they were using, right? In terms of lenses, the telescopic, the telescopic tubes, right? What position should we do? Should we do it 5 degrees at a tilt, or should we go straight up 90 on a zenith? How do we actually get accurate measurements? My point of saying that was that eventually led to the Michelson-Morley experiment, and it was considered to be the most precise instrument that was ever created at that time.
At that time, yes, but then let me ask you: can we measure stellar aberration today at a much higher quality and accuracy than he could?
Yeah, sure. And
okay,
here's the
does that mean that stellar aberration is wrong?
No. Well, what is stellar aberration? What does it show?
It shows that the background stars are moving in relation to the foreground stars.
Okay.
And it has a pattern which conforms to the Earth's orbit around the sun.
Okay. Now, have you ever thought about the idea that stellar aberration is an effect of a medium that is basically the ether wind, right? That matches sidereal rotation, that is causing that aberration. And the reason why Airy's failure was called Airy's failure was because to actually prove that stellar aberration, where that comes from either Earth moving or the stars moving, Airy's basically just put water in a telescope. You know that? So he basically yeah. So
what?
In
but
reality,
hang on a minute.
Hold on.
In reality, as we do this, hang on.
Can I finish my thoughts, Stefan?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Jesus, bro, you're getting all hyped up. All right. What I was trying to say is when he put water in a telescope, okay, and this is very important. At the time, they were all referring to Arago and Fresnel, the creator of Fresnel lenses, right? Because they actually showed that the speed of light varied in different mediums, right? Going with the flow of water, against the flow of water, etc. And that there is an actual a differential of the speed of light once you put it in a different medium. So the question was, okay, if I have to tilt my telescope 5 degrees from zenith in order to get the star that I'm looking at to be completely in view, then if I put water in my telescope, then the speed of light should change and slow down before it hits my eye at the end of the eyepiece, right? Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. So what happened was they had a prediction, right? Because Earth is moving 30 kilometers per second, supposedly, around the sun. And if the starlight is actually, if we're getting stellar aberration because of the stars themselves moving versus our Earth's movement versus the stars' movement, then the angle that we would get, that we would mark down in terms of like the difference between where we see the star in our zenith versus with the water in it, then there should be an angle change. Like there has to be an angle change, but there wasn't. There was no angle change. This is what led to Mickelson Morley, dude. Like that's crazy. So like the simple fact is like,
why is that crazy? I mean, let's say, okay, that short tube with water, how much would that slow down the light as it hits the lens until it's observed?
we're talking about arc minutes here.
No, I'm talking about the speed of light. Speed of light through water. I can't remember the length of that telescope, but the way, yeah. I mean, could you even measure the different timing of light in the air compared to traveling through the water at such a short distance?
What Fresnel did. Yes.
And he could measure the change or the difference in timing of light through water and the atmosphere at over such a short distance.
Yeah. Do you know who George Bedell Airy was? He was like a polymath dude. The dude was insane. I mean, I'll find you papers themselves, but George Bedell Airy.
So hang on. You realize it doesn't actually slow down; it just gets deflected around. It is still doing the speed of light. It's just bouncing around within the medium. Once it comes out, it's back to the speed of light. Once it's through the water.
So it slows down and speeds up again?
No, it doesn't actually slow down. It just takes a longer path.
So it takes a longer path, therefore it should slow. That means it should go slower. You put it in water, it goes slower.
Yes, it takes a longer path. The actual light photon is still doing the same speed through the medium. It's just bouncing around and somehow coming back out at the other end. It's once it's left a medium, it's back to the normal speed again because it's just going in a straight line. But I don't see how this does anything.
You don't understand. You don't see how that's a ridiculous explanation versus that. Versus the idea that Earth's stationary.
I can't completely agree.
Remember Occam's razor? Remember you were saying that earlier?
Yeah,
but the understanding of how light interacts with the medium is just like our friend from Australia, whom I just told you. That's the understanding.
Dude, if you put light in different mediums, right? That's why we have the refractivity index or the refractive index, right? Through glass, through air, through water, through diamond, etc. The speed of light is different in all of those mediums.
The speed of light is constant. It's just that it takes a longer path, because if it slowed down, the energy of it would change, would be different. It would move towards a red area of the spectrum. That doesn't happen.
Okay. It takes a longer path, which means the deflection angle should be greater.
Now we're talking about light now. If light slows down, it would mean that the energy would change. But it doesn't.
So you say it takes a longer path through a diamond?
Yeah, it bounces in between the electrons inside the atoms and inside the diamond.
That makes more sense than just saying that it goes slow inside the denser medium.
The speed of light is constant. It just when it goes into the medium, like a diamond.
You guys have a dogma. You guys think the speed of light has to be constant because of relativity's postulates. This is the dogma. This is the scientism.
No, dude, no, you've actually got it wrong. It doesn't slow down, I just said. It just takes a longer path.
It takes a longer path, but doesn't slow down. That's retarded. If I drove to a different city and I took a longer path, who's going to get there first? The person that takes a shorter path or the longer path?
Yes, but it's still, you just say we both did 60 mile an hour. and I zigzagged, you would get there first because you went in a straight line.
Exactly.
Me zigzagging, I'm
wait.
zigzag. My photon, that's me, is zigzagging through the diamond because it's bouncing off sides of the diamond.
Does light take a straight path through a diamond?
No. It's being deflected around, which is why it is taking, which is why it appears to slow down. But to say it slows down is really a very, I don't know what the word is, a poor term for it. And you're using that
to say
explain,
it takes a longer path when it takes a direct line. Like if you can shine if you imagine like a square prism of glass.
I didn't say that, Rick. Please don't come.
You said it's a longer path. I'm not going to
deal with you. I'm not in the mood for your conflation today, Rick. Sorry, dude.
It's one of the two, Boomer. Why do you always freak out when this sort of like you get confronted with this?
No, because funny, you're not getting confronted. You just jumped in when I explained it. When I just explained it simply, you just jumped in to conflate it like you do. And as I've just said, I'm not in the mood for your conflation, Rick. Thank you.
You explained it so well, didn't you? Just give your little self a pat on the back. You'll be right.
Hey, Risky, why don't you ask him? Man. Why don't you ask him how did they measure the speed of light?
I think you might have to ask him, bro. He's cut me off. It's very sad.
Because I don't think he knows how the speed of light was actually measured.
I mean, this goes into like a huge history, but this at the time, and this is what I'm going to do for you guys. All right, if you guys are serious about actually trying to get to the truth, and you're saying you guys aren't dogmatic, that you're open to new ideas and you're open to new information, because I'm open to it. I'm 100% open to being wrong about the ether, about what we live in and what the cosmos is and what the earth is. I'm okay with being wrong. I don't care because I just want to know what's true in order to do what's right. That's my philosophy. Like, I need to know what the truth is in order to do what is right. Because if I don't know what the truth is, then how do I know I'm not doing any harm by teaching someone or telling someone wrong information? So that's my philosophy. So I'm okay with being wrong. I don't know if you guys are okay with being wrong. Stefan already admitted that he can never accept that the Earth would not be in motion.
Well, it's just Milgram's experiment. Then they're just looking around. It's like, oh, we all agree. Yeah, we all agree. Oh, yeah, okay, I agree. Rather than being right or wrong.
To change my mind, the evidence needs to be extremely strong and much better than the evidence we have for the Earth actually moving.
Well, here you go. I'm going to give you the full rundown, and this is how, like, people just kind of hand wave dismiss that what happened like over 100 years ago with the Michelson-Morley, but this was extremely talked about amongst all of the top physicists, scientists, in terms of optics, in terms of, material sciences, etc., because of this experiment. Like, this was a huge moment in history. So I just tagged you guys, or here, I'll tag you guys so you guys can have it. Let me see. I'll tag Daza. I'll tag Boomer. I'll tag Stefan. Tag Red Cloud. And it's honestly fascinating. It's a very fascinating book. It's the most detailed compendium I've ever read. I'm not even done with it. About the entire experiment itself. Who else? Who else wants it? Let's see here.
The ethereal ether, spelled with the ETH and then the second word. Ethereal is ETH and then ether is AETH. That's an interesting title. The ethereal ether.
Awesome. Look at the table of contents. If you just want to look at that real quick.
So what was the conclusion of that experiment?
Let's see here.
There's a lot of history. Wow. It goes through 1880 to 1883. Michelson and interferometry, the classic experiments, 1884 to 1890. Contradictions. Oh, contradictions. Is that the same word? Oh. Contractions. Oh, contradictions and contractions. 1890 to 1900.
About the Lorentz contraction.
Oh, right. For some reason, it looked like the same word, and I was like, no, it's not the same. But I was like, I would need to zoom it in to see it a little better.
By the way, you guys asked me about Airy, like what was the telescope he used, right? So it even talks about it here in this book. One further optical experiment must be considered before we see what happened to Faraday's speculations. The Astronomer Royal of Great Britain in 1871 was Sir George Bedell Airy, a postman noted for precision. In that year, he became interested in the possibility, expressed across the channel, that astronomical aberration might vary with the thickness of the refracting lenses in transits and telescopes. Airy built a special 35-inch long telescope whose tube was filled with distilled water expressly for testing the equality of the coefficient of sidereal aberration in water and air. He solved his technical problem to his own satisfaction, but others were to take his assertion as corroborating Fresnel's convection hypothesis also. Airy found no difference due to the medium in the tube of the aberration coefficient. This was often interpreted as a blow against Stokes' notion of a stagnant sphere of luminiferous ether around the Earth. James Clerk Maxwell stands in relation to Faraday as Fresnel stood to Thomas Young. So basically, there was like this linkage between light and heat. And for those who don't think that James Maxwell, who basically is the reason why we even have the electric grid, didn't believe in an ether, as Professor Parks, said here in this VC, he was like, I don't know if Maxwell ever, knew about the ether. He basically said this right here. He said, this is actually super fascinating. Wait till you hear this. Give me a second. He said this. I'm sorry, I'm like deep into this. There's a lot in this book, you guys. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. Yeah, you even have Doppler, right? Doppler's involved in this, creating, the history of the Doppler shift. Like, there's so much to it. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. I know. Trying to get this here.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Maxwell thought ether could be a medium. Yeah.
So for me, a lot of this stuff is quite interesting, right? The physics is interesting. I find your conspiratorial take on it interesting. But going back to our conversation half an hour ago, it's part of the reason that flat Earth gets such a bad rap, right? You're so focused on the conspiracy that you've forgotten about the flat Earth. You still claim it, but you are not anywhere near the flat Earth. This is stuff that is not going to support your flat Earth in any way, shape, or form, right? All it does is support the conspiracy.
Dude, I don't see any evidence of globe Earth, period. If this is the paradigm of believing in a globe, where literally it's locally flat everywhere, then I'm that's fine. I'm okay with that. So I guess I do live in a globe if it's locally flat everywhere, right?
That's probably a factual statement, right? Locally flat. That is something that we can all agree on.
Yeah, but Daz, it's just all it's just all interrelated, because to have an Earth in motion, I've never really heard of somebody trying to have a model with like a planar Earth in motion. Maybe upwards, I guess. Some people have talked about that it's going up or what, like an elevator. But other than that, which is pretty small niche kind of concept, and we could go into that whole what that may or may not be. But I mean, generally, the Earth being in a motion to account for all of these facets that were thought of to be related to the ether, including even what we call gravity, the motion of the stars, like all of it was related to ether. It seems like before Einstein and a lot of the more heliocentric stuff came along and so on. And then in this 1800s, like late 1800s, early 1900s, when a lot of this was going down. So when you're saying it's not about the Earth shape, but it's just all interrelated. And I mean, just because somebody may not claim one thing or the other about the totality of the whole realm doesn't mean that it's not interconnected. Because if you have a stationary Earth, what other shape could it be? I guess you could have a ball that's stationary with an ether, but that could be, I guess, contested or discussed. But I'm just saying it's all related in terms of the motion, the medium, these effects that are observed, and then what.
No, it's only related by the conspiracy. There's no physical relationship between any of these things in the flat Earth, right? The ether has.
What are you talking about, Daza? Hold on, wait. Pause right there. What you just said is completely incorrect, and I'll prove it to you right now. You said there's no relation to any of the physicality.
The flat Earth, right? That the ether as a concept may come back. You never know. That they may be able to describe something like the ether that replaces general relativity, for example. But at the end of the day, there isn't an alternative description, and it's not the cure-all. The ether is not going to,
for now,
solve gravity. Yeah, but it doesn't mean.
But listen to what James Clerk Maxwell said, okay? And this is the guy who basically is, responsible for our electric grid that we all use today. Okay, this guy. James Clerk Maxwell had given the most authoritative sanction for preference to the ether over all objections to its hypothetical and paradoxical character. His article on ether, first published in 1878 for the 9th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, concluded with the sentence, and I quote, "Whatever difficulties we may have in forming a consistent idea of the constitution of the ether, there can be no doubt that the interplanetary and interstellar spaces are not empty, but are occupied by a material substance or body, which certainly the largest, and probably the most uniform body of which we have any knowledge."
Sounds like dark matter.
That's from Maxwell, dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So he had a view and some limited knowledge. Just because, what I'm trying to say here, the historical perspective is one thing, but sorry, I lost the words, a bit distracted.
It's a quote, but it's not actually backed up by valid evidence.
It took your breath away. I think that's what that's called.
What are you talking about, Stefan? How are you just gonna just straight up say that?
Hang on. Where is the actual strong, valid, empirical evidence for ether to exist?
How about the A field?
Bro, Nicholson, Morley, Dayton, Miller. There's thousands of experiments done, literally thousands of experiments done demonstrating there is an ether.
And the conclusion of Nicholson-Morley was what?
Remember, this all started with was it Greg? No, is that who you guys were saying earlier?
I'm no doubt. Yeah.
Bob. Yeah, it started with Bob with the laser gyro, right? Something's causing that laser gyro to process at different rates depending on your elevation. Exactly. It's obviously can't be the globe, right? And this isn't. He's not the only one. He's following the footsteps of Mickelson, Morley, and
Maxwell,
Dayton, Miller, and Wayne.
Can you guys share a reference to that?
So the evidence is there. The evidence is there, right?
Can you share it?
So Maxwell,
it's overwhelming at this point. It's overwhelming at this point, but because of a philosophical impasse, right, a philosophical bias, the evidence is then put to the wayside and hand wave dismissed.
So if we go
like what you guys did originally, right? Is keep the heliocentric model alive. You post hoc, ad hoc, rationale.
So if we go by
right, and then you just continue to persevere in your belief dogmatically. Every time there's evidence, right, that shows the contrary, you either disregard it or you ad hoc rationalize it away. Go ahead.
So okay. So if we go by Maxwell, he says there must be. That's it. He says there must be, but he's got no evidence for it to exist.
Yeah, Newton said the same thing. Newton said the same thing. You know why? Because
that's not evidence. For fuck's sake.
Hold on, dude. There's evidence of different types. You have inductive and deductive evidence to suggest that there must be a medium of exchange. You can't just have spooky action at a distance with no medium of exchange. That would literally violate the law of causality. So in order to preserve logic, right, you need a medium of exchange. Newton said this in his
light and radio waves. Hang on.
All right, dude.
Are you saying that light and radio waves and things like that has to have a medium to propagate? Why?
Yeah, in order to preserve the law of causality, right? You need a medium of exchange.
Why? Explain why. You're just saying it, but explain in detail why. Okay.
Tell you why. All right. First of all, what do you subscribe to? So I know how to frame the argument.
No. Just you go ahead. I'm just asking.
Okay.
To give a detailed explanation for why radar and light need waves, need a medium for be able to propagate.
Yeah. Okay. When you have a wave, okay, and a wave is not a physical thing; it's an action, it's a motion. Okay. So what is the light waving in?
Why does a photon has a wave in itself?
Is it not waving in anything? How do I have a sinusoidal pattern that is determined by, frequency, amplitude, watts, hertz, whatever? It has energy,
well, that's just,
and it has a wave pattern, and it's traveling.
That's just no. The sinus curve is just the energy or the frequency you're measuring. You're not measuring if it's traveling through a medium.
Well, what's it waving through?
It's not. It's just a change of frequency and energy.
Okay, so if I send you a radio signal from, let's say I'm opening up my garage door with a remote control, and I tap my button, okay? What is the electromagnetic propagation propagating through to get to the receiver end of my garage door?
Just the distance, just the space between you and the receiver. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, so
just the space.
Yeah, there doesn't have to be a medium, right?
Why?
No,
that is something you're putting on your interpretation of what a wave physically is.
No, you have to prove that there's no background. You have to prove that there's 99.9% empty space between atoms.
Why do we
like in the vacuum tube, like lasers in the vacuum tubes of LIGO?
Yeah, and you know what they call that? Quantum vacuum fluctuations.
Yeah, but that's not quantum. Yes, quantum fluctuation. Here you go. This is
you know why quantum doesn't work? Is because you can't actually quantify it. That's what quanta means. The undefined.
No.
The undefinable. Yes. It doesn't have physical meaning.
Does quantum field exist?
Okay, what's the field propagating in? Where does it emanate from?
It doesn't have. It just exists. It exists.
It just exists. It just exists. This is why it's retarded. This is why the ether should come back. Now I'm gonna read this because I wanted to read this earlier before we got on this. But this is from Maxwell himself, and this is the reason why. And I'm sad that OK Boomer left, but he was like, "Why are you going down this pathway?" Right? Like, literally, all of it's connected. I'm not just like popcorning here. This is all connected. This is from Maxwell again. Another quote from him, and he says this. He says, "Let's see here. Oh God, give me a second. Oh, I just lost it. Here we go, right here. Yep, the fundamental importance. Yeah, right here. This is it. He says, okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Beginning of the 19th century. There we go. Perspectives. I'm so sorry, guys. Hold on a second. This is really important, though. Yeah, so there was definitely...
While you're looking that up, let me just say very briefly, I was thinking before about, the waving, and it has to wave in something, or something has to be waving for a waving action to be occurring. If you have nothing waving, then you wouldn't even have a wave. But I was thinking of another just analogy, which whether it works or not, but I was thinking, like, let's say there's two fish in the ocean and one fish eats another fish. And if you were to say, oh, that fish ate that other fish has to have a body to be eaten. You can't just say, well, that fish ate that fish, but there wasn't a body there. It just made me think of that. I don't know if it's even a great, perfect analogy or not, but just made me think, like, there obviously would have to be a body to be eaten, and in the same way, there would have to be a medium for things to exist within.
Found it, by the way. So right here, it's one of two most important questions that James Maxwell posed before he died. So he says this. He says, our whole progress up to this point may be described as a gradual development of the doctrine of relativity of all physical phenomena. Position we must evidently acknowledge to be relative, for we cannot describe the position of a body in any terms which do not express relation. The ordinary language about motion and rest does not so completely exclude the notion of their being measured absolutely, but the reason of this is that in our ordinary language we tacitly assume that the earth is at rest. Our primitive notion may have been that to know absolutely where we are and in what direction we are going are essential elements of our knowledge as conscious beings. But this notion, though undoubtedly held by many wise men in ancient times, has been gradually dispelled from the minds of students of physics. There are no landmarks in space. One portion of space is exactly like every other portion, so that we cannot tell where we are. We are, as it were, on an unruffled sea without stars, compass, soundings, wind, or tide, and we cannot tell in what direction we are going. We have no log which we can cast out to take a dead reckoning by. We may compute our rate of motion with respect to the neighboring bodies, but we do not know how these bodies may be moving in space. And that's one. And this is what actually sparked Michelson to answer that question. Absolute motion versus relative motion versus how do we know if the Earth is moving or not? Should we use geocentric or Ptolemy? I mean, Ptolemy or who's the other guy? Copernican. There's another thing here, Geo, that's super interesting. Like I said, this book is so fascinating. It's so like it actually is fascinating because it's so thick with information. He even has like little biographies about Michelson Morley, Dayton Miller, Michelson and Morley are different people. Albert Morley, etc. Morley was, or Miller and Morley were basically, friends with Röntgen, and Röntgen was the guy who created X-rays. Like these guys are all interconnected. Like think about that, you guys. Here we go. This is another one that he said. And this is from James Maxwell. Again, this is one of the things he said before he died, like literally right before he died. He said, if it were possible to determine the velocity of light by observing the time it takes to travel between one station and another on the Earth's surface, we might, by comparing the observed velocities in opposite directions, determine the velocity of the ether with respect to these terrestrial stations. All methods, however, by which it is practicable to determine the velocity of light from terrestrial experiments depend on the measurement of the time required for the double journey from one station to the other and back again. And the increase of this time on account of a relative velocity of the ether equal to that of the Earth in its orbit would be only about 1/100 millionth part of the whole time of transmission, and would therefore be quite insensible. So before Michelson and Morley's instrumentation, like before they actually traveled around, went to Paris, went to Europe, went to the top scientists in the world to figure out how to build this contraption, this interferometer, which was called like a refractiometer at the time. They put everything they could into this experiment in order to actually, pay homage to Maxwell's question, or to actually kind of like prove them wrong that they could do it, right? You know who funded all of this too? Alexander Graham Bell. I didn't know that until I read this book. So I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? I want to hear some globers though. Like, how is this not important to talk about, or how is this, a conspiracy? Like, no, this is like the history of physics and optics and light.
Yeah, and science regarding that has come a long, long way since Maxwell.
Yeah, in what way?
Accuracy, technology, the accuracy of measurements, type of measurements. I mean, you could go by VLBI measurements.
What would you say? VL what?
VLBI, very long baseline radio interferometry.
So it's the same thing?
No, not really.
Yeah, it is. It's the exact same technology.
Well, but not the way it's used. You have radio telescope all over the world, from the South Pole to Svalbard in North, Japan, Hawaii, US, Europe, and they connect all these radio telescopes as to end up like one giant radio telescope, measure the amplitude and the time dilation from the same radio signal being received.
So, okay, the time dilation, right?
Yeah.
Time dilation is another thing that was used to basically cover up the Sagnac
time
effect.
Dilation was wrong. That was my
because you have
the time it takes for the radio signal to reach the different radio telescopes.
Yeah, because it's actually traveling through a medium, and that temperature and different pressures would affect the actual oscillating rate in these cesium clocks, like the atomic clocks, like they did. And
pressure. Yeah, but the atomic clocks are controlled for pressure and temperature. You know that.
Yeah, but if you're in an environment like, let's say, an airplane, that you're
we're not talking about airplanes.
Well, that's where
on the ground.
That's where time dilation came from.
Yeah, but that was my mistake. I was not talking about time dilation.
What were you talking about?
The time difference. The same radio signal takes to reach the different antennas.
What about it? The induction rate?
The same radio signal coming from quasars. How long it takes for that radio signal to, let's say, hit the antenna on Svalbard and not Hawaii?
Yeah. What about it? Yeah. What about it?
What's your point?
If the point is that the ECEF is or the most accurate terrestrial reference frame we have is based on the VLBI,
which
shows that the Earth is spherical and rotating.
Okay.
Relative to the quasars.
Weren't we talking about Michelson-Morley and the idea of an ether? Why are you guys bringing that up?
Deflection, dude. And the thing
it's
is,
total deflection.
When you consider the time dilation, right, regarding radio propagation, whether it's satellites, GPS, whatever the case, light, right? This is the thing. When Michelson-Morley did their experiment, what they were presupposing, and many during that time were presupposing a static ether or a stagnant ether, right? Not moving, but the Earth moving through a stagnant ether, right? And their results actually did prove that, we didn't have a static ether. But if you consider that the Earth is not in motion and that the ether is in motion, right, and that the ether varies like in elevation, right, that makes way more sense than time dilation due to bending and warping of space-time, or that the instrument contracted somehow, which is what they needed to do to make this heliocentric model work with the Earth in motion. All they needed to do was go back to the drawing board and simply consider, are we wrong about this presupposition about the Earth in motion? If they would have done that, they would have realized that there's a way more elegant model that restores causality to time dilation. What you guys consider time dilation?
So, Lion, do you realize that if you apply that same logic to the ether on a flat Earth, you're going to have all this weird warping and twisting and strange behavior of the ether to explain it over a flat Earth, right?
No.
Yes, you are. It cannot be a uniform, simply rotating medium.
You ever thought about it being a torus field?
Yeah, it's a toroidal. It's a dynamic ether. Yes, it will, because the ether's in motion, and when light propagates through the ether, right, it causes a drag, because the ether itself has real dynamic effects on light and on planetary bodies, right? It actually resolves the reason that you guys needed dark energy, dark matter, is because you couldn't make it work with gravity alone, and you need to invoke some other, missing mass. But if you just went back to the drawing board and you realize that there's an ether, a background medium that has real dynamic effects on matter, right, you can actually have a unifying theory of physics. But you guys aren't willing to do that.
So I can guarantee,
it would mean that the Earth isn't in motion. Go ahead.
I can guarantee you that. So I'm open to the fact that there might be some kind of ether, right? That we have another way of describing gravity and electromagnetic propagation. Well, not necessarily gravity, but some of these phenomena. But you'll have an enormous challenge making any of those things fit in the paradigm of a flat Earth, because you won't be able to maintain the coherency and consistency of your ether model.
Hold on, dude. Hold on. Don't take the bait, dude. We're having a specific conversation. You want to deflect to the fucking shape. Let's put the shape aside. Let's put the shape aside for a second.
Because we don't give a fuck if
because it's a non sequitur, dude. It's a deflection. We're having a specific topic regarding the Earth in motion, and you want to bring it to shape because you don't have a rebuttal. So you just want to go, well, it wouldn't work on a flat Earth. Yeah. What about
the conversation earlier?
What about it, dude?
So we touched on this earlier, right, about flat Earth and your PR thing. So the challenge is, right, that this is a deflection. The whole cosmology and the ether is a deflection.
No, we've been having a conversation. No, because there's baby steps, dude. There's multiple factors to consider here, right? Is the Earth in motion is one factor completely independent of the surface of the Earth, right? The surface, whether it's flat, whether it's concave, that's irrelevant to this topic. We're specifically talking about the Earth in motion, right? Because there's baby steps, dude. People aren't going to accept flat Earth if they still accept that the Earth is in motion. So first you have to walk them through this, right? So a lot of us, first we found out that the moon landings never happened. Then we found out that the Earth is in motion. Then we came to flat Earth. You don't just jump to flat Earth right away. There's baby steps, and we're trying to walk you through the baby steps, and you're just trying to talk about flat Earth.
So, but the challenge is, right, that the first thing in any of these field theories, so the ether is effectively some kind of field theory, right? And you need to start off with the geometry of your field. And that is step one in understanding whether or not these things exist and what properties they will have.
Okay.
You haven't got step one sorted yet.
What do you mean?
What do you mean step one, dude?
We're
talking about
step one is to understand
the
geometry of the world around you, right?
Hold on. I got you.
Then you can apply field theory to the geometry.
Be honest right now. Be good faith. What did I start off this entire conversation with? That there was two main questions that we can tackle. Do you remember?
I probably missed it. I was coming in and out a while ago, so apologies if I missed that.
I framed the entire conversation as shape and motion. Now, when we're discussing the ether and the experiments of Michelson-Morley and of Rago and Fresnel and Helmholtz and Newcomb and all of these great scientists of the time, like very huge figures in the fields that they respectively represented, right? Even Alexander Graham Bell, who was a patron to this entire experiment. Everyone wanted to see this experiment work because what it did was it provided a gateway for the material sciences in terms of creating instrumentation that is accurate. Right? Now listen, I'm just going to read this description to you real quick, Daza, because this is not just like a simple thing. So this is, and I quote, right, from the American Journal of Science in 1881. It gives full details of the experimental difficulties, description of the apparatus, the acknowledgments of Maxwell, Bell, Professor H.C. Hogel of Potsdam. He said this: Michelson was fully aware of the primary difficulty to be expected with the instrument, namely the effect of temperature changes. The arms were brass and about 1,000 millimeters long, corresponding to approximately 1.7. Well, it says 17. This is 1,700,000 wavelengths. Concerning the quote-unquote principal difficulty to be feared, Michelson said, if one arm should have a temperature only 1/100th of a degree higher than the other, the fringes would thereby experience a displacement 3 times as great as that which would result from the rotation. Formidable as this objection was, Michelson was undeterred. He had covered the arms with paper boxes to guard against temperature changes induced by drafts. He even surrounded the instrument with melting ice, but to no great advantage. Michelson loved the precision, the accuracy which this instrument made possible. He had become almost more excited about the instrument than about the experiment. And I quote, so extraordinarily sensitive was the instrument that the stamping of the pavement about 100 meters from the observatory made the fringes disappear entirely. If this was the case with the instrument constructed with a view to avoid sensitiveness, what may we not expect from one made as sensitive as possible? Although Michelson concluded this paper with the confident assertion that the hypothesis of a stationary ether is erroneous, he did not, and we should not, infer from this anything more than that one aspect of one of the ether theories was shown to be untenable. That is the key. Right? That means the static ether he disproved.
Right.
In that assertion.
And we're not talking about a static ether. We're talking about a dynamic ether that's in motion, Mach's principle, right? The entire mass of the universe is in motion. And that the fluid itself has real dynamic forces that apply to matter. So the centrifugal forces, it's called the dude, I'm trying to remember right now. It's called. Give me a second. It's called can't think of it right now. Anyways, so in your model, you guys try to say it's due to reference frames, right? They're pseudo forces, fictitious forces the Coriolis effect, right? It's fictitious, it's pseudo. That when it comes to centrifugal forces around the sun, we don't actually feel them. They're pseudo, right? The Earth is in a zero G geodesic. There are no actual forces being applied to it.
So
that's the general relativity description of an orbit and gravity. But the motion thing and
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so if you look at the motion thing, like the Aether guys have been looking at Jupiter. If you looked out into space at Jupiter and its moons, would you say that the moons orbit Jupiter, or would you say that the everything's orbiting around Io?
No. So this is interesting because in the Neo-Tychonian model of the universe, with Mach's principle considered, you still have orbits, right? It doesn't just do away with orbits. You still have orbits. For example, all the wandering stars, i.e. the planets, they orbit the sun, right? And the sun, dragging the planets with it, orbit the Earth, and it preserves all the kinematics and there's dynamic forces that are no longer fictitious or pseudo, and it explains retrograde motion. It explains redshift and blue shift. Dude, it literally explains everything. You don't need expansion. You don't need relativity. You don't need time dilation. You still have absolute space, absolute time, an absolute reference frame. So it restores causality. It restores logic. It literally does away with this weird mysticism that Einstein came up with, and it's literally way more elegant. Anyways, go ahead.
It's not more elegant. It's actually a lot more complicated in a lot of ways. But do you realize that you can take that model and you can lift and shift it anywhere in the universe? You can make any point in the universe the center under that model, and the same rules will apply.
Wrong. No, that's what Einstein was wrong. Yeah, that's what Einstein said. Einstein's been debunked 10 times over.
No,
all these, dude. Time is not constant, right? I mean, light is not constant. Time is constant, right? And there is a preferred reference frame that all other reference frames are inferior to, and it's the Earth, the lab frame. Earth stationary centered frame is the superior reference frame, contrary to what Einstein said.
But does you say Einstein's not been proven wrong? Well, why do you think in the mainstream right now, as we're
talking, say that. I didn't say that.
You just said it. You said it. You said no. You said no to Lion.
Kinematically, yes. Kinematically, you can choose Pluto. You can choose Mars theoretically, right?
Yeah.
But dynamically,
and you can play the same.
Dynamically, you can't.
No, you can. Any of those models you talked about, so taking Earth as center and doing the Neo-Tychonian thing, the Earth is not unique in that perspective, that you can apply that model anywhere you like. You can choose any reference frame.
You still have to, you still have to have in respect to Earth, though, no matter what.
Earth will be part of it, but the Earth will be just another. No, you don't have to have Earth as a 0 point. You can choose any origin you like for those kind of modeling.
No, you can't.
You can.
Because if you're moving on, let's say you use Mars, okay?
Yep.
Mars is orbiting. It's moving. Okay? So that can't be your 0 point.
Why?
That's why
Earth
they call
is the
it
same.
Earth. But that's why they use Earth-centered, Earth-fixed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh, you missed the point.
point.
We could make a Mars-centered, Mars-fixed Neo-Tychonian model, just like Lion was describing for the Earth. And it would look almost identical, except a different center. But anyway, I've got to drop.
But you don't understand that. Kinematically, it works, but not dynamically. Because the forces will end up crushing everything, dude. Like it literally fall apart. Because if you have this center focal point being the Earth, and the whole universe is spinning around the Earth, and then you try to apply that to like Pluto, it's not going to work, dude. The forces don't work; they fall apart.
So, I'm going to read this, and this is from this book. This book is awesome. This book is like, I don't know, whoever this guy is, Lloyd Swenson, kudos to this guy. for compiling this stuff. Anyway, this is from Lord Kelvin, aka Sir William Thomson. Okay, so before he was Lord Kelvin, he was Sir William Thomson. He says this, and then says, before a public audience in Philadelphia in late September 1884, Thomson had no qualms about being too forceful. You can imagine particles of something, the thing whose motion constitutes light. This thing we call the luminiferous ether. That is the only substance we are confident of in dynamics. One thing we are sure of, and that is the reality and substantiality of the luminiferous ether. He felt such statements were justified in order to persuade his lay audiences that the fantastic speeds of propagation and the infinitesimal lengths of light waves could actually be manipulated and measured. The elastic solid theory of the ether was hardly a problem compared with the difficulty of convincing non-scientists that the heat of moonlight can be measured, or that man can determine the frequency of a certain band of a red light to be 4 trillion cycles per second. The luminiferous ether was easier for Thomson to explain publicly and privately than Maxwell's electromagnetic theory of light. Exhibiting a large bowl of clear jelly with a small red wooden ball embedded in the surface near the center, Thomson would shake the bowl of gelatin and thereby demonstrate what he meant by an elastic solid ether. And I quote, when we explain the nature of electricity, we explain it by a motion of luminiferous ether. We cannot say that that is electricity. What can this luminiferous ether be? It is something that the planets move through with the greatest ease. It permeates our air. It is nearly in the same condition so far as our means of judging are concerned, in our air and in our interplanetary space. The air disturbs it but little. You may reduce air by air pumps to the 100,000th of its density, and you make little effect in the transmission of light through it. The luminiferous ether is an elastic solid, for which is the nearest analogy I can give you is this jelly which you see, and the nearest analogy to the waves of light is the motion which you can imagine of this elastic jelly with a ball of wood floating in the middle of it. So it's not just Michelson Morley. This is all of the top scientists of the time before Einstein. This is exactly what was talked about.
Oh my God. It's it's so funny. That is the dark matter that they're looking for. It's all around us, but they deny its existence, dude.
They have to, because then they would have to deny the postulate of relativity, which is that the speed of light, is constant and cannot change, which is crazy. That's such a crazy ass dogmatic belief.
Okay, so I've got to drop, but I've got a quick question before I go, if that's all right, for Lion. Would you say, Lion, that the Earth ECF frame ECEF frame we talked about before is a perfect inertial frame?
Yes.
Yes.
Besides
incorrect.
Within reason. Because, I mean, when you talk about earthquake, right?
No, just
plate
tectonics.
I mean, in general, yes, the Earth is the inertial reference frame. It's at rest.
It has to be, dude. What do you mean? Name another frame.
Stable, immovable, and fixed.
Yeah, name another frame that's more at rest than the Earth. Go, I dare you.
The barycenter of the solar system is a better inertial reference than the
you ever been
Earth
there?
itself.
You performed experiments there?
So, see, this is what goes back to the first part of the conversation, right? You people have been there and have done experiments using that, right?
What?
So we're going back to the core of this conversation, which is the rejection of the sphere.
What experiments were done at the barycenter of the solar system? What the hell are you talking
about?
So,
dude,
anytime, your guys at Juno,
bro, we'll grant you this
let him
first
finish.
For a second.
Line. Just let him. I want to hear this. What are you talking about?
So anytime we launch something into space, the reference frame will probably be the barycenter one, which is I think it's probably ICRF J2000 reference frame, which is essentially the barycenter of the solar system, oriented with quasars as the reference.
Yeah, okay. I want to know.
That is very stable, right?
Experiments there. I want to know what experiments.
Or experiments using it, I should have said, not from there.
Okay, so it's not from there, so you're not actually in that reference frame to claim that you did experiments there. So what are you talking about?
No, we've done experiments using that reference frame. So
without
the
anybody
Aether
being
guys,
there,
right?
without anything
Yeah.
or anybody being there.
You don't have to be there. You can, if you do your calculations in a reference frame, then conduct the experiment, and your experiment matches, then you've probably got the reference frame right. Okay.
That's retarded.
So the motion of objects through the solar system is most easily described with that reference frame.
So if I present a paper that has, Narnia with Aslan as my scientist who's basically performing it in a Narnia reference frame, well, because my calculations are correct, therefore that reference frame is valid and at rest.
No, so this is why you guys get spoken poorly about, right? That's a straight dive into the dumpster in terms of yeah. So take for instance the work the Ethicos guys have just done about Jupiter, right? So all of those ephemerises that they were using are based on that reference frame. They're not Earth-centered ephemerises, and we know that those things work because we have objects orbiting Jupiter, right? And we got them there because of that reference frame.
You're just begging the question. Dude.
No,
Even your preset, Einstein said, dude, you 2 seconds ago you were saying that all reference frames are valid. Now you're like, oh well, this is the superior reference frame.
No,
use
I'm
the
telling
quasars and the barycenter of the solar system, that's the preferred reference. Dude, you're being inconsistent. You're being incoherent. Einstein himself said there's no preferred reference frame. They're all valid. There's no optical experiment that you could do to show that you have a preferred reference frame. That was his dogma. Now you're trying to go against it for some odd reason, saying that the barycenter of the solar system with the quasars at the extremities of the CMB is the preferred way to measure orbital mechanics, correct?
No, I said that is a better inertial reference frame, and inertial reference frames are the easiest way to calculate projectile motion. So if you want to shoot anything into space through the solar system, having the quasar as your reference, the ICRF reference frame will give you the best results. And it will clearly show that the Earth rotates relative to that reference frame. So I guess the short answer is you get something that best approaches an ideal reference frame if you use that one, and the Earth is moving within that reference frame, orbiting and rotating. It's not ideal
because you can only simulate it, dog. How do you not understand?
You're just begging the question, dude. Yeah. You're appealing to people. Yeah, the very thing in question, which is the system, right? The solar system and the mechanics.
Been physically used.
Now you're appealing to people shooting fucking probes into space, dude.
Oh, yeah, I have a question. What is the server? I joined due to XCD Archive. Yeah, I don't remember what this is.
It's all good, Darian. Just kind of sit back a little bit. We're right now we're having an argument about motion and the idea of the existence of a dynamic ether versus the postulates of relativity that are dogmatic, in my opinion.
Okay. Shit, was I in a group with this guy? I don't remember now. I just think that XCD guy is like.
Yeah, we don't know about any of that. Who that is.
I might leave because he's just inviting me to like a bunch of random fucking religious servers and shit. Like, well, yeah, I'm interested in like what is it? The laws of physics. Yeah, why does it need to like
just sit back and listen real quick then.
Fine. Educate me. I sometimes do stuff like this. We had another XCD guy before, and yeah, let me let me listen here for a bit while I'm in. That's fine.
There you go. Welcome. All right, Dawson. You brought up the barycentric coordinate system as more valid than the Earth. Oh, he left.
Oh, I'm still here.
He had one last question. He asked me if the Earth was perfectly inertial. I said yes, and he's like, no. He talked about the barycenter and the quasars, which I understand that's what they use in modern times. They actually use the quasars as a pseudo or quasi stationary frame, a reference point. You ever heard about that?
Yeah. Have you seen quasars though, bro?
Yeah. They use a group of quasars, not one quasar. They use a group of quasars at the extremities of the observable universe. They try to say that's the most stable reference point that one can use because it would take millions or billions of years for it to like process like a fraction of an inch. So they'll use that as a quasi stationary or pseudo stationary reference point with the Berry Center.
Have you seen why they use quasars though?
They're bright,
dude. When you look at what quasars are, right, and where their position is in comparison to Earth, they're in concentric circles all around Earth. Concentric. Let me see here.
No doubt.
No, but just think about that for a second. That means all of these quasars align themselves with Earth as the center point. That's why they're able to use it as a timing mechanism.
Well, the Earth. They claim that though the Milky Way seems to be relatively at the center of the observable universe, that the Earth itself isn't. That's why he was saying that they use the Berry Center of the solar system. But still, that is odd how the Earth just happens. It's not because of our position, because some people say it's because of our position. It just looks like it's at the center because how light radiates. But no, dude, it's not because of that. They've sent, allegedly in their model, they've sent probes out right beyond where Earth is, and they've done the math, and it's just another cosmic coincidence with the axis of evil. That we just happen to be at the center of creation, relatively at the center of creation, even in their model.
Yeah. Huh. Oh, that's interesting. He said my 2 contributions, I guess. That's interesting. All right. Anyway, I don't want to get distracted. I'm gonna read this though, Lion. I'm telling you, bro. This book is.
Dude, keep reading, bro. You've been killing it, dude. That's what you're giving us the sauce, dude. Keep going.
Dude, this sauce is nuts. All right, check this out. So it says this right here, right? Says by the mid 1880s, the triumph of the undulating theory of light, right? And the continuing progress of the electromagnetic theory with a consequent extension of these two, namely the ether concept as a medium for all types of radiation, meant that the impeccable authority of success blessed Thomson's words, when we can, and I quote, when we can have actually before us a thing elastic like jelly and yielding like pitch, surely we have a large and solid ground for our faith in the speculative hypothesis of an elastic luminiferous ether which constitutes the wave theory of light. Nonetheless, one serious reason for doubt was the unsatisfactory state of undulatory explanations for aberration. Thomson recognized this explicitly in talking with his peers about the question of the Earth's motion through the ether. And I quote, "The subject has not been gone into very fully, so that we do not know at this moment," said Thomson, "whether there is a drag effect or the ether acts as a frictionless fluid. Both Michelson and Morley heard and accepted this challenge. If they could obtain another quantitative corroboration for Fresnel's experimental proof of Fresnel's hypothesis that, number one, the ether is stagnant but that moving media will partially drag the ether along inside it, then they could really consider it established that Fresnel's notion of a stationary or stagnant universal medium was valid. More evidence was needed if this hypothesis was to become a reliable postulate." And then it goes into the Aether drag test. So before the Michelson-Morley experiment with the interferometer, in 1881, they did the Aether drag test to first establish the validity of what Fazal and Fresnel had did before them. Just for reference for those who are like, what the hell are we talking about? All right, so
real quick, the fact that they're even referencing Aether drag shows that this isn't like some pseudo bullshit that we made up, that flat earthers made up.
Yeah, I
that
know.
This has existed, right? Because you know how people say, "Oh, that's non-scientific, that's pseudoscience." No, it's not, bro. It's in history. Go ahead.
So it says this right here. Oh, here's a little picture of it too. Oh, this is cool, dude. You know, this is the beginning of optics. Isn't that crazy? You see that line? I know you're probably driving.
Hold on,
right now.
I just literally just parked. Let me see. Would you post it in the chat?
2 diagrams of Fazal's apparatus of the 1850s.
I see it.
Nice. So check this out. So let me skip a little bit ahead. He said, "My dear Professor Gibbs," and he was talking to Gibbs, who basically helped fund this first experiment. He said, "My dear Professor Gibbs, your welcome letter was duly received, and I have delayed answering till my experiments were completed. My result fully confirms the work of Fazal, and the result found for," and it says, "a squared minus 1 over u squared was 0.434, which is almost exactly the number for this expression when we put for when for A we put the index of refraction of water. I had heard that the relation between maximum and mean velocity of liquids in tubes had been the decade Gibbs or had been worked out but have not been able to find it, so I made an experimental determination and found the ratio to be 1.165. I think my result shows that your estimate of Thomson's work is correct. The number 0.434 is correct to within 2 or 3%, and I can say with a good deal of confidence that it is not 1/2. I also repeated the experiment with air with a negative result. I expect to publish the data in a few weeks." And then that was in response to Josiah Willard Gibbs, where he has a document called "A Comparison of the Elastic and the Electrical Theories of Light with Respect to the Law of Double Refraction and the Dispersion of Colors." And another paper, "A Comparison of the Electric Theory of Light and Sir William Thomson's Quasi-label Ether" in 1889. So that's where this guy is getting it from. So like all of these things are backed up by documental evidence. So let's see here, dude. It goes deep into it. But basically, once they figured out that Fresnel was correct in terms of Fazal was correct with the refractive index of air versus water, then that was all they needed to get the go ahead from Alexander Graham Bell to fund this instrument. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much it would have cost them, but
it was the most expensive and meticulous experiment ever conducted at the time.
Dang.
Like, think about the sensitiveness of it, right? And you're talking about 1880s, right? The dude literally got melted ice, which means he had to get a block of ice from like Alaska or whatever, or like some place like Finland or something, and then have it like sectioned out, melted all across the apparatus, and then covered it in box. Like, dude, you had money back then for all of that. Now, this is also really funny. Right here, it says this. So, in setting out to perfect the marvelously sensitive instrument first constructed for him by Berlin instrument makers, Michelson knew exactly wherein his technological difficulties lay. His earlier trials had been handicapped by apparatus at once too sensitive to environmental vibrations and to distortions caused by rotation, while on the other hand not sensitive enough to detect with the required margin of precision the extraordinarily small quantity to be observed. The first two difficulties were solved by mounting the optical parts on a massive stone slab floating on a mercury ring bed. The third was obviated by increasing the optical path length through repeated reflections to a distance 10 times longer than at first used. The optical parts for a new interferometer were made by the master craftsman John A. Brashear of Pittsburgh, who, although self-taught as a maker of astronomical instruments, was nevertheless without a peer in the delicate arts of lens grinding, mirror polishing, and speculum metal casting. Brashear furnished 16 small speculum metal mirrors about 2 inches in diameter and 2 plain parallel glass plates cut from the same piece, one being carefully half-silvered by Brashear's own newly developed front-face silvering method. So you had people that were like experts in all this stuff. It's insane. And then people want to just be like, "Oh, they got a no result. Hey, we're in relativity now." Yeah, so this is also really fascinating. And you know what? You know what's funny, Lion? I literally had this same exact question when I first met Alan and Toby and Shane. Back then, we were talking about Michelson Morley. And my question was, how did they know that the light beam was split 50-50 exactly? It kind of was just like overlooked. I'm like, how do they have the material science capability to actually perform this experiment, right? And I actually got my answers in this book, which is awesome. Had no idea, dude. Yeah, like I'm skipping all this stuff up, but dude, it is like page after page after page of the actual precision and delicate materials that were used. All right, here we go. Now this is awesome right here. He says, astonishing as this lack of resistance may be, it is not the most peculiar revelation of the history of the original Michelson-Morley collaborative effort to detect ether drift. The fact that what was really intended as a preliminary effort came, by default, to be accepted as a final report is most astonishing. This brief series of observations was conclusive enough. The authors soon came to believe, for them, to publish the results as a falsification of the stagnant ether hypothesis. Their claim rested on the basis that the predicted effect did not have the expected magnitude. Writers on relativity have so often celebrated the quote-unquote null or quote-unquote negative results of the experiment that it needs to be emphasized once again that quote-unquote the indicated effect was not zero. It might as well have been zero, but in truth it was merely far less than what was expected on the basis of Fresnel's theory of astronomical aberration. Instead of a maximum fringe shift due to orbital motion of something like 4/100ths of a band, Michelson saw at most a shift of 1/100th of a band. Thus, observing less than a 20th of the predicted shift, they could hardly do otherwise than conclude, in accord with experimental error, that if there is any displacement due to the relative motion of the Earth and the luminiferous ether, this cannot be much greater than 0.01 of the distance between fringes. The relative velocity of the Earth and the ether is probably less than 1/6 the Earth's orbital velocity, and certainly less than 1/4. If there be any relative motion between the Earth and the luminiferous ether, it must be small, quite small enough entirely to refute Fresnel's explanation of aberration. Boom, and I quote. That is such an important quote. That is such an important quote because They first established Fresnel and Fazal to be valid in terms of their experimental results in 1859, and then repeated it, right? So they made it valid. They repeated it. It's great, right?
Well, even in that quote, like he didn't believe the Earth to be stationary, bro. So he was saying it can't be more than this if the Earth is in motion.
Right. So it's like what they observed, right, was great enough to falsify stagnant ether, but not great enough to show orbital velocity or orbital motion, which is exactly what, you know, people have been saying for a long time that are proponents of ether, that it wasn't a null result.
It didn't. But it didn't match the Earth's motion either. You had the Earth's motion through the galaxy, and then the Earth's rotational motion.
Yeah. And then, let's see here. Let's see here. Yeah, contradictions and contractions is what Gio was talking about earlier. Oh man, there's so much to it. Dude, Heinrich Hertz was involved, Faraday. So many. Let's see. I'm going to go to Einstein. Yeah, Einstein's own writings. This is great. Here, yeah, this is great right here. Let's see here. Oh man, he rips into him. Okay. Sorry, there's so much to it. Oh, here's another thing. You know how they say, oh, Einstein was never influenced by the Michelson-Morley experiment, right? This is a picture of all of them together. Let's see. Here we go. rotate it though. Hey Geo, you there? This is the picture right here. Michelson and Albert Einstein shown here at their first and only meeting at the Caltech at the Athenaeum, January 1931. Their host, Robert A. Millikan, third Nobel laureate in the picture, is on Einstein's left. In the back row, left to the right, Walter S. Adams, director of Mount Wilson, where Dayton Miller performed those interferometer experiments. And then you got Walter M. Mayer and Max Farrand. Now I want you to notice something about this picture. You see the hand in the pocket?
I'm here. I just can't talk, dude. I'm busy.
You're good.
I'm listening.
Yeah, if you just look at that picture, though. Yeah, they definitely knew each other. Doubt. Bro, I'm trying to find this. I'm almost there. Let's see here. Found it. Finally, okay. This is, and I quote, in 1949, by Millikan, who's the guy with his hand in his pocket, that unreasonable, apparently inexplicable experiment fact was very bothersome to 19th century physics, and so for almost 20 years after this fact came to light, physicists wandered in the wilderness in the disheartening effort to make it seem reasonable. Then Einstein called out to us all, "Let us merely accept this as an established experimental fact, and from there proceed to work out its inevitable consequences." And he went at that task himself with an energy and a capacity which very few people on Earth possess. Thus was born the special theory of relativity. And then this is from the author. The truth was quite different. Einstein himself occasionally took the opportunity to indicate that the supposed influence of Michelson's experiments on him during his own formation of relativity theory was at best indirect. One can, however, see in retrospect the tight linking of Michelson's experiments and Einstein's theory, a posteriori, in popular print was almost inevitable, and primarily for a purely pedagogic reason, the puzzling result of Michelson's Morley experiments could be straightforwardly explained by relativity theory, and conversely, the initially obscure and theoretically based relativity theory could be made more plausible by causing it to appear as a necessary derivation from experimental results. This supposed symbiosis is convenient, but it is unfair to the accomplishments of both Michelson and Einstein. On the one hand, though the experiment helped him in the acceptance or justification of this theory, Einstein could, and very probably did, work without conscious reliance on the Michelson experiment. As he said in one of his interviews, I was not conscious it had influenced me directly, I guess. I guess I just took it for granted that it was true. And in any case, it was only one of a whole series of puzzling ether experiments that had accumulated by 1905. For example, those of Mascart, Fazal, Rayleigh, Brace, Troughton, and Noble. By his own account, the experimental results that had influenced him most were the observations of stellar aberration and Fazal's measurements on the speed of light in moving water. He says, and I quote, "They were enough," he reported to have said in 1950. And on the other hand, Michelson's experiment would justly have been regarded as one of the few immortal achievements of experimental science, even if relativity theory, which in a sense trivialized the result of the experiment, had never been proposed. One does not have to agree with every paragraph of this book to see that it is full of stimulating ideas. As for me, as I found myself scribbling notes and queries to myself constantly as I was reading the manuscript from which the book was fashioned, and that is one of the best tests of the and an important contribution. We are fortunate that Professor Swenson had both the resources and the courage to tackle this great case. And that's from Gerald Holton, who basically wrote this article called The Crucial Experiments, Einstein and the Crucial Experiment, in like 1969. And that caused Professor Swenson, Lloyd Swenson of Texas University, to formally create this book, which is almost 400 pages of the entire history of the Michelson-Morley experiment. So, like, you know, people always say, like, oh, why are you guys bringing that up? Oh, you're trying to get away from the flat earth discussion. It's like, no, this is just very important. This is a very important discussion. Oh, okay, Gio. Yeah, if you go into the book, I just wanted to show you, they have all these illustrations that start at page is that 106 in the book and then 129 in the PDF. Dude, you see these contraptions? It's wild how big they were too. I'll do you a favor though, and I'll just repost all of them.
Dude, it's crazy too, like the time that this was happening. Like one of those 1924 to 1926 ether drift apparatus. Like it's just amazing that they were doing this. And then you have like the Great Depression comes in and just slams the world, and then you got World War II. And Einstein and the crew come in. It's crazy to think of how this was all just stopped. And wasn't there like there was that they called them like anti-Einsteiners or something, like the Dayton Miller. There was like even like a contesting between them.
I'm not sure. I think so, but like I haven't even got very far into this. Like I'm only on page like 90 out of like 400. Like there's so much to it. Like I can probably skip through it a bit and see if I can find something for you. Let's see. Let's see see if that pops up somewhere. Okay. You should totally read it, Gio. There's an anti-atomism.
Yeah, it says here. I just did it on. Yeah, no, dude, this definitely. It does seem like there's a ton in here. We could almost do like probably take weeks or if not months to go through it all. But I just did a quick chat GPT. It says, yes, in the early 20th century, some critics of Albert Einstein and relativity were informally called anti-Einsteiners, sometimes spelled anti-Einsteinians, or in German context, anti-Einsteiner. Dayton Miller was often grouped in with them because he publicly challenged relativity through his ether drift experiments and defended the idea of the luminiferous ether. It says, but there's an important nuance. Miller was not mainly a political or ideological anti-Einstein activist. He was a mainstream experimental physicist who believed his interferometry data showed evidence against special relativity. He debated the physics experimentally rather than attacking Einstein personally. Many historians distinguish him from the more extreme anti-relativity movement that included nationalism, anti-Semitism, or crank science. It's just crazy what went on with World War II and that whole period where this was all occurring in science. I mean, I guess they try to tell us like, oh no, Einstein just came in and just superseded all of it, and they just kind of brush it all under the rug. I bet most people in this discussion probably don't even know a lot of this history. And like you said, they just link it in with, outmoded or just outdated and don't, but really be interesting to even dig deeper into it of what all was actually occurring. And yeah, it seems like the Great Depression and World War II would have had a huge impact on this, on the kind of development of just the world and where things were headed, and the whole control of science, like getting control of it to where they could have their things put forward. Because then everybody born in the 60s, 70s, like, oh, Einstein's the smartest man in the world, but they don't even know this history.
Dude, the history is nuts, man. It says this right here. To Bernard Jaffe on March 17th, 1942, Einstein wrote, "It is no doubt that Michelson's experiment was of considerable influence upon my work insofar as it strengthened my conviction concerning the validity of the principle of the special theory of relativity. On the other side, I was pretty much convinced of the validity of the principle before I did know this experiment and its result. In any case, Michelson's experiment removed practically any doubt about the validity of the principle in optics and showed that a profound change of the basic concepts of physics was inevitable." And then he wrote, then there was a personal conversation, July 8th, 1953. The Michelson-Morley experiment had no role in the foundation of the theory. He got acquainted with it while reading Lorentz's paper about the theory of this experiment. He, of course, does not remember exactly when, though prior to his papers, but it had no further influence on Einstein's considerations, and the theory of relativity was not founded to explain its outcome at all. Let's just forget about it, guys. And this is from Polyny, where he says, the usual textbook account of relativity as a theoretical response to the Michelson-Morley experiment is an invention. It is the product of a philosophical prejudice. When Einstein discovered rationality in nature unaided by any observation that had not been available for at least 50 years before, our positivistic textbooks promptly covered up the scandal by an appropriately embellished account of his discovery. Yeah, this is the most right here. This is one of the most contested paragraphs. He says, let's see. He left his postulates to speak for themselves, being content with the following discursive paragraph as the key to his program. All problems in the optics of moving bodies can be solved by the method here employed. What is essential is that the electric and magnetic force of the light, which is influenced by a moving body, be transformed into a system of coordinates at rest relatively to the body. By this means, all problems in optics of moving bodies will be reduced to a series of problems in the optics of stationary bodies. This passage is now widely recognized as Einstein's most succinct statement of his purpose in this paper: to preserve the invariance of Maxwell's equations so that unlovely electrodynamic asymmetries might be removed. But most physicists today recognize that the first two of Einstein's three great papers of 1905, published in June and July, and concerned largely with reconciling certain contradictions between Newtonian mechanics and Maxwellian electrodynamics, made contributions to physics almost as important as the critique of space and time in the last of those three papers. The first contribution was the quote-unquote heuristic photon, a suggestion which greatly simplified manipulations in quantum theory and allied Einstein's name with Planck's in the quantum challenge to the wave theory of light. The second paper amplified Brownian motion as an integral feature of the kinetic molecular theory. What is not generally recognized is that the word heuristic, introduced into the physical vocabulary with the idea of light quanta, applied with equal force to the postulate of relativity. Some have averred that Einstein's insistence on the heuristic character of his photon and relativity postulates was primarily a means of defense against the attacks he could foresee on these radical departures. But the tone of confidence, the strength of logic, and Mach's philosophic influence are persuasive evidence that Einstein offered these postulates as quote-unquote working hypotheses of real physical promise. Unlike the operational, meaningless quote-unquote thought experiments in which he trained his fertile imagination, the heuristic qualifier was added only to those theoretic principles that produced experimentally verifiable or falsifiable predictions. Einstein usually provided invitations to experimentalists to test his models. This is the essential meaning of the twice translated judgment that, quote-unquote, Einstein alone crossed the Rubicon by making a principle of what Poincare qualified as a postulate. So much, dude. I can go on and on, but I'm just, I don't want to bore people.
Good stuff, dude. Keeping me entertained, interested.
It's wild, man. Oh, this is interesting right here. This is from Poincare himself. He says, it expressed too well this is talking about the ether in the experiment. It expressed too well the natural kinship between all optical phenomena. We know nothing as to what the ether is, how its molecules are disposed, whether they attract or repel each other, but we know that this medium transmits at the same time the optical perturbations and electrical perturbations. We know that this transmission must take place in conformity with the general principles of mechanics, and that suffices us for the establishment of the equations of the electromagnetic field. Poincare remained skeptical until death that the Michelson-Morley experiment had ever found a satisfactory explanation. He, and certainly many others, would agree with Owen Ely, who wrote in 1910 that the only clear answer to the question, "What is the ether?" is the reply, "The greatest enigma of all time." Dude, that's so funny. Listen, I just made this argument against Daza. He says this. He says, the principle of relativity is one attempt, and by far the most successful attempt as yet, to explain the failure of all experiments designed to detect Earth's motion through space by its effect on terrestrial phenomena. In the relativist camp, we can, and indeed do have, quote-unquote, waves, which, quote-unquote, wave in nothing save a field. Furthermore, to those who had accepted the new doctrine, the principle of relativity promised to become at least as far-reaching in its effects as the second law of thermodynamics. That's so funny. So they believe it waves in nothing except for a field. Like, what's the field emanating in or from? It's ridiculous, dude. Oh, and you got to remember, Geo, 1917, World War I. That was also going on.
Yep. Well, it was kind of more near the end of it, but yeah, like through that time though, that would have potentially been another major shifting point in just like kind of the control of science and the paradigm and what was being put out to people and the control system.
It literally talks about it right here, dude. It says, when, in 1914, the First World War since Napoleonic times broke out, the social and economic integration of national societies in Western civilization was so complete that scientific vocations, as well as all others, suffered a severe redirection. Whether modern wars have done more to stimulate or to impede the progress of science may as well be a moot question. But World War I certainly proved as total to scientists as to anyone. Because of the absorption of scientific interests in engines of destruction during the latter half of the decade, 1910 and 1920, it is not surprising that the 4 years from 1914 to 1918 should constitute a hiatus for pure science. Most men, scientists included, as the socialist movement discovered its chagrin, were patriots first and professionals second. But before 1914, the scientific community was far less divided on nationalistic than on intramural grounds. The physics profession was very far indeed from a unanimous acceptance of the Einsteinian postulates. As a result, these were critical years for the ether hypothesis, as well as for European diplomatic equilibrium. We must now try to see why so many were reluctant to allow the ether concept to die. In the few years since the turn of the century, physics had changed tremendously. Michelson at the Ryerson Laboratory at the University of Chicago had done much to shape these changes by his basic work in experimental optics. Likewise, Miller at Case School in Cleveland had done much in this special field of acoustics for the advancement of physics. He too was one of the leading experimentalists in America, recognized as a contributor to a renaissance of interest in musical and architectural acoustics. That's pretty interesting. After his retirement in 1906, Edward Morley moved away from Cleveland and became rapidly less active in any scientific pursuit. Morley was to live until 1923, but his age and inactivity greatly limited the extent of his interest in the current progress of science. During the war, Michelson was called back into the Navy to work on an optical rangefinder, and Miller was commissioned to study the effects of acoustic and shock waves from big gun explosions. After 1918, Michelson and Miller returned to their separate specialties and separate locations. As a Nobel laureate, Michelson was the more famous scientist, but Miller too was growing into an outstanding authority in his field. Neither man was pleased with what was happening in the world of physical theory, ostensibly as a result of the Michelson-Morley experiments. Both were exceedingly reluctant to admit that the ether concept had fallen. Interesting.
Sounds like they took it out with bombs and bullets.
Crazy.
The wars. I mean, maybe it's too far to think that they did those world wars for this reason. Obviously, that could be a bit far, but there could be a motivation to control science and to change the direction of things into. So really, the globe Earth is like the World War I, World War II. You look at that whole evolution and the Federal Reserve and what all happened for the whole like modern science of what we have today, what we just call science.
Listen to this. In 1910, this guy Whittaker says, or Sir Edmund Whittaker, A History of Theories of Ether and Electricity. He said, The theory of relativity had its origin in the theory of ether and electrons. When relativity had become recognized as a doctrine covering the whole operation of physical nature, efforts were made to present it in a form free from any special association with electromagnetic theory and deducible logically from a definite set of axioms of greater or less plausibility. But with regard to the ether drift experiments, it is an understatement amounting to historical, wow, that's a weird word, bowdlerization, simply to say, as Whitaker continues, it should be mentioned also that when relativity theory had become generally accepted, the Michelson-Morley experiment was rediscussed with a much more complete understanding and exactitude. That it was rediscussed, and often certainly with a much more complete understanding, is not to be denied, but scientific passions were often inflamed beyond the point of rational understanding. And then, oh yeah, this is it right here. Like you were saying, the anti-Einsteinians. It says, to begin with the responsible conceptual conservatives, we cite first an honored physicist in anger. On December 28, 1911, William F. Maggie of Princeton addressed the American Physical Society, which had just elected him president, with a blistering attack on relativity and relativists under the title The Primary Concept of Physics. Maggie vehemently insisted on retaining the concept of force in spite of Hertz and the two separate concepts of time and space in spite of Einstein. He conceded that the ether was not necessarily indispensable, but in his opinion, the abandonment of the ether concept would be a quote unquote great and serious retrograde step. In his view, the radical relativists were attempting Baron Munchausen's feat while trying to escape from a tower by a rope that was too short. The mythical Munchausen made good his escape by splicing on some more rope obtained by cutting from above. That's crazy. Maggie's address demonstrates that the principle of relativity was well known among his brethren, that the legend of Michelson-Morley paternity of relativity was already accepted, and that the intrafraternal controversy over the usefulness of relativity was well underway. Thinking it unnecessary to give account of the relativity principle in his address, Maggie stated, it may fairly be said to be based on the necessity of explaining the negative result of the famous Michelson-Morley experiment and on the convenience of being able to apply Maxwell's equations of the electromagnetic field without change of form to a system referred to moving axes. Maggie insisted on the counter evidence that the principle of relativity was not needed to explain the experiments by Fizeau, Mascart, Brace, and those of Kaufmann and Butcherer. Why then, he asked, should we allow Michelson-Morley experiment to upset all our primary concepts of physics? The principle of relativity accounts for the negative result of the experiment of Michelson-Morley, but without an ether, how do we account for the interference phenomena which made that experiment possible? Dope. And it goes on to like 4 other scientists at the time totally destroying relativity. This is fun. This is awesome. And Karas's kind of criticism was considered impertinent and irrelevant by practicing physicists. A third example of the kinds of opposition which relativity theory encountered in the transitional decade could hardly be so easily ignored. This came from the experimental laboratory itself. In the last months of the year 1913, 2 reports were given to the Académie Française by a French optical physicist, Georges Sagnac, who claimed to have arrived at positive experimental evidence for a luminiferous ether. So even Sagnac was involved.
You. I mean, I really feel like they're reevaluating it though, little by little, starting from the quantum or the atomic scale. They're noticing that they're with quantum computing, they're actually analyzing the orbital spin of electrons. So, in that world, you actually have real centrifugal forces. Like the spin of the electrons themselves cause real forces to be transferred. You could scale that up to like orbital mechanics, cosmic orbital. And that's what they're starting to find out, that it's actually the same force.
It's a very interesting topic.
Oh, Tank's in here. What's up, Tank?
What up?
Tank's been on some shit lately, dude. You guys gotta connect. I forgot to mention.
What up, Beastie? I saw you in here. I was stoked to see.
What's up?
Yo, you should share your notebook link one of these days with us. No, Tank got one.
Oh.
Regarding the same topic.
Yeah, it's kind of tripping
add
me
that
out.
book to it too. Add that book to
It's actually really tripping me out that I come in here and you're talking about the Sagnac and the gyroscopes. It's crazy.
Oh, it must be a conspiracy. I must be controlled op.
Fair enough. Have you heard of the master gyroscope?
No.
I just stumbled upon this. It's like 2 gyroscopes operating like clockwise and counterclockwise, lined up so they perfectly flow.
Can you post it?
Yeah. Called the it's like the Master Kleiser scope. The idea of this is this mechanism could, it not only doesn't work as like a master reference, it can't be influenced by any like electrical, it's like a natural Faraday, but it's also very resistant to like vibrations. But it can, some of the other things that I'm seeing about it are that it would have conserved, like Lion was explaining, how all the way down at the atomic structure, you have these rotating, I'm calling them like lattice positions.
Yeah, they're vortices. Yeah, it's definitely vortices and lattices, but
yeah, there's just, exactly, they're little vortice points, and these are constantly spinning. So there, to me, this points out that you could build this gyroscopic mechanism that's actually storing all of that. You know, it wouldn't be it'd be the term like continuity of angular momentum, not conservation. It'd be like continuity of it, because it spins all it's conserved all the way down to the spin of the atomic structures. You know, and you could actually build a system so accurate with these gyroscopic systems, you could harness that into like a kind of an equilibrium flow. That's what I think the master compass was.
Yeah, you're gonna have to post this. All right, I'm gonna end this book reading line with this quote. You ready, bro? Yeah. And this will shut up any relativist right now. That there is no such thing as ether, because this is from Einstein himself. It said Einstein expressed his changed attitude in a neglected speech, Ether and Relativistic Theory, to a lead-in audience in 1920 on the home grounds of his elder friend and conservative colleague, Lorentz. Einstein asserted, and I quote, "We may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable. For in such a space, there not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense." And I quote.
Wow, that's a good one, dude. I didn't know that was in there at all. I don't think anybody's ever said that. Einstein said that?
Einstein said that himself, dog.
Well, otherwise, I mean, if you don't have a medium of exchange, you know, you literally violate the law of causality. Like, there has to be a contingent medium to transfer energy, to transfer force.
I said that would be the last one. So much sauce in this book, dude.
You may have heard of this book. It's Occult Ether Physics by William Lynn. What's the book you're reading right now? What's that called?
Called The Ethereal Ether, A History of the Michelson-Morley Experiments. I tagged you in it.
Ethereal, man.
It's so wild being able to organize all this with the Notebook LM. I've got like almost 60 sources. Every time I find this new source like this, I get excited.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Found something really interesting with this master compass. And it's like a connection with Operation Paperclip. We all know about all that stuff, but the technology they use to build this master compass comes from Tesla's engineering. He engineered some sort of, I've got it all mapped out, but it's an equation that maps out an equilibrium point in the rotations of these systems. So it's like the basic concept, if that makes sense. Trying to find it in a message I sent.
What is the master compass? What is it?
Yeah, it's a device that allows you to keep a master reference frame to north, and it's tuned actually to the field lines of the Earth, so it never changes. It's it's literally like the ultimate master reference frame. I think there'd be some crazy stuff to find out what you could use it for measurements, unknown, but. So during apparently when Tesla was activating some of this technology, he invented this gyroscope tech so that he could still be able to move around after the optical distortion that was created by the tech. So creating these strong fields around, and this is around his theoretical propulsion, like his spaceship tech. This would, because once the pilot's inside the craft, when it's powered on, there's this optical distortion field that pops up around it. So this gyroscope allows you to still steer the ship and stay level, even though there's powerful electromagnetic fields. So it's like a natural Faraday. But to me, this connects very heavily to anybody else thinking of this? This optical distortion that's going on with this type of technology. This is exactly what we're experiencing with the celestial body we're on, the environment we're in.
Oh yeah. The projection of the globe or the projection of the sky, right? The celestial dome could be a product of some type of optical distortion, you're saying, because of the field.
Yep. And you would be able to measure that with Steinmetz equations if you use Tesla's L squared equation, theoretically. Yeah, this stuff is wild. Also realizing they were just speaking a different language, basically. I've kind of developed a little bit of a codex or a matrix for the ether terms that are known effects that they talk about today. Like Salvatore Pais, he's got some patents where he's showing basically the solid state versions of the analog systems that Tesla and even Hutchinson were using. There's an effect some of you guys know about, the Cooper pairs. This is like room temperature superconductivity. Salvador Pais figured out how to do this just by taking a Teflon wire and coating it using gas electrolysis with a piezoelectric ceramic like quartz, similar to quartz.
I read that. Yeah, I sent you 3 patents. I don't know if one of them had. I remember reading about it, the ceramic coating.
Yeah, it's crazy seeing how this all comes together.
Dielectric insulator.
Yeah, the Teflon acting as this, core, and then they're vibrating the string at a certain frequency, and this, the Teflon or the ceramic coating is creating a current from the vibration and being under a charge. And this creates a relationship with the electrons. When it's flowing along it doesn't create any heat. It flows perfectly. The electrons pair up and it's frictionless flow of what they call the electricity. But this is it's really, there's huge implications with this. This is proof of this omnidirectional pressure that electricity is actually just taking space. The idea of a capacitor. When you charge a capacitor, it's some sort of compression you're creating. But if you really know electricity, you understand this is creating two magnetic fields next to each other. The plates aren't touching. And by putting a charge on one plate, you force electrons in the other plate to start to become excited. And without anywhere for those to go, you just charge up a capacitor. Like that's literally how a capacitor works. So this is the idea of you're actually putting enough energy into that space to where there's an outward force that's omnidirectional that's going to restabilize as soon as you connect a charge or a place for those electrons to go. This is it's unbelievable if you really start to research how electricity works. This is proof of an ether. This is proof of an omni medium or some sort of omni particle. I think it's light. So
yep, that is ether.
Yeah, maybe even boil it down more and say it's information. Maybe. How do you feel about that? I'm juggling with it because of the idea of like, where's the source of the light? Well, to me, it's
if information is transcendental, immaterial, where the ether might have transcendental properties, but it's substantive.
Mm.
Like God, right? When we talk about God, God is made up of both immaterial, transcendental attributes like knowledge, morals. God is morality, right? God is moral. Morals are immaterial. Logic, immaterial, right? Knowledge, immaterial. But he also has substantive, right? So you have his essential attributes, which are made up of like essence, right? When we talk about essence, with the essence of the ether or the essence of a human being, the essence of a human being isn't only substantive, right? It's not only substance. It's also like who your father was, right? What the love that he gave you, who your father is, like his identity isn't only made up of his body, right? It's more, your father is more than his body. You get what I'm saying? It's also the transcendental categories that are packaged with his body.
Basically, information is more of, it's still after the fact. So light probably is more accurate.
I think you're correct. I think that the ether is both made up of immaterial, transcendental properties and also physical, substantive properties. Both. And it's most things are actually irreducibly complex in this way that most things are made up of both. I'm hard pressed to think of something that's not. Besides, when it comes to reality, because reality itself is irreducibly complex. It boils down to triune minimalism. Actually, Ken Wheeler, it's funny because Dyslo put on a video the other day where I don't know if you were there watching it, but Dyslo put on a video with Ken Wheeler who was breaking it down, talking about if you were to boil down reality itself, right, to its most fundamental, essential property, its most fundamental essential properties are irreducibly complex, and it boils down. Like if you were to dilute reality, it would boil down to triune minimum, which includes essential properties that are transcendental, immaterial, like information, purely information that's not part of like the material world. It's not like this is something that materialists would struggle with, right? The idea that there are abstract concepts that are transcendental but yet real and aren't made up of matter or aren't contingent on matter or like chemical reactions in the brain, hormones, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Neurotransmitters.
Integral to the visible and the non-visible. So wild. And dude, I'm tripping on some of this stuff, like Walter Russell's periodic table. When you really I've come to a really wild understanding about it. with its connection to these harmonic nodes that allow some of these lattices to exist, like matter structures, being able to correlate that to a sine wave and how it maps with these equilibrium points you can map out. Like matter is literally existing in a perfect balance. Like these are harmonic balance points with whatever medium we exist in. It is so trippy. It's and to realize like consciousness is connected to this, this whole like the potentials and non-potentials coming into play. It's really exciting. Like I don't think you have to believe in like ether physics or anything. Like some of this stuff is almost just apparent.
The information, dude, it's pretty insane. But and just to clarify, Ken Wheeler was not promoting triumph minimalism. He's basically they basically hijacked it, or it's basically the same thing except refashioned or reformatted, whatever. But he breaks it down to a triangle and the logos. He talks about the logos, God, how God is a triangle, which is kind of funny, dude. I was like, dude, Ken Wheeler, but he refuses to accept that God is sentient. But anyways,
yeah, he's like almost purposefully trying to keep the crowd of people that don't believe in God. So yeah, I'm not too worried about him though. You know what I mean? I think he's playing that line on purpose.
But so the ether is being manipulated and controlled ultimately by the prime mover. So the information that basically coded the ether to act a certain way. That the laws that govern our world, the natural world, including the laws that govern the ether itself, were created by God. Like those are created laws.
Yeah, he's the firmware. He's the source code.
Yeah, the information that manifests within it, right? The structure, the order. Logos is synonymous with order. The order that orders the structure of our reality is, according to the scriptures, Jesus Christ. People, it's hard. I know that's the honest truth. That's what's behind the ether, right? Is Jesus Christ, which is hard to accept if you're not a.
Yep, and all the instructions on how our body works, all the secrets to all this advanced tech, it's written in the freaking Bible, the oldest, most accurate book on the planet. So hermeticists may want to take a little seat because they've been copying and pasting from the origin text of the Bible for a very long time.
In him, all things consist.
Yep, dude, I've got a whole like insane decode on the anatomical description of the body from the Bible, like all the five senses. The tabernacle is straight up a map of the nervous system. It is insane.
You know how in the Matrix, when the guy Neo, he enters the architect's room, and he's got a bunch of monitors. I always found that odd. Like, dude, this is the architect. This is the architect of the.
Yes, sir.
And the Masons, they do have they talk about the God of the universe being a grand architect.
I've got a very like hot take. I'm not sure if I want to share it quite yet, but I think I've decoded what the snake actually means.
The Ouroboros?
What's Ouroboros? What do you mean by that?
The snake eating its tail.
Oh,
I thought that's what you were talking about.
Oh yeah, I just
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros.
I should remember that term. Very good.
Isn't that connected to electromagnetism? How it's like flowing in and out, or it's like.
Yep. And the snake itself. Yeah, the snake itself symbolizing the nervous system in the spine and how it leads all the way up into the temple of wisdom, the skull, and just how we process information is almost perfectly depicted with the snake. It's really trippy, and it's like the knowledge of good and evil translates to this concept of us applying knowledge through our nervous system, almost creating creativity. I'm still trying to figure out what the connection on like through this lens, like what the fruit idea is like. If you look at this, like the idea of like what was the fruit?
Well, the thing is, if you're gonna interpret the biblical stories or scripture narrative with through like a Gnostic understanding, they're gonna try to reduce it all to nothing more than like metaphysical concepts, electromagnetic concepts and stuff like that. But I assure you that the tree in the Garden of Eden was a legit tree, and then the fruit of it was also legitimate. It was a legitimate fruit, not to be reduced nothing more than a metaphor, right? Or esoteric, cryptic symbolism. It was a literal tree with a literal fruit. Enoch says that the fruit itself represented or resembled a cluster of grapes, not an apple. And it's also corroborating the apocalypse of Abraham. It was a legit cluster of grapes.
I'm leaning towards it being a fig tree. Does it feel crazy?
Well, Enoch, I have two sources saying it was great. It looked like grapes. It looked like grapes.
Ooh.
What kind of tree?
Grapes.
Grape tree? Fig tree?
It resembled grapes. Right? It resembled grapes.
Yeah. What tree was the knowledge? The fruit of good and evil on, or whatever. What kind of tree was it?
I think it's something else, but don't I think that about everything?
Throw it out there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pull it up, dude. But grapes.
Now we need about 2 more cups of coffee before I can explain anything of that.
Oh, here, I got it, bro. I got both Enoch and Apocalypse of Abraham in one picture. Here you go, it's Tanks. I'm gonna post it in the chat. So I have it in my gallery. Good thing. I have to look for it. If you don't mind reading it. Or you don't have to read it, but
I'll check it. Yeah, I'll check it out. Oh, I was looking at the wrong text. Wrong chat.
He's been reading all night, dude. It's been fun, actually.
I'm burnt. I'm actually about to dip right now. I'll catch you guys.
Peace, dude. He literally read like all night.
You're running into you, man.
Later.
Peace, man. Fruit which resembled grapes. Does that mean that it's not grapes, or is that just saying that it is grapes?
Yeah, it's not. It's not grapes. It looks like a cluster of grapes. Or it might have been in the family of grapes, dude. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing because when you consider what Messiah was, Jesus Christ, who restored, right? He's in the process of restoring reality. He's the vine, right? He represents a grapevine. So you have a grapevine / tree that corrupted humanity, and then you have Jesus Christ, the righteous grapevine that restores humanity. And I don't think that's a coincidence. You know how he says, "I am the vine, ye are the branches," in the Gospels. Well, he's the vine that grows around the olive tree, because the olive tree, being Israel, was corrupted, and then the vine needed to come and even restore Israel.
What about the word divine? Does that play into that at all? Divine?
I'd have to look into the etymology. I'm not sure. Divine, vine. But you have this idea that there was a tree, and I don't know if I believe this, but this is from a book that's not even considered apocryphal. Well, it is apocryphal, but it's not part of the Apocrypha in the King James. But it's called Third Baruch, and in that book, it talks about one of the fallen angels, Samael, planted a poisonous, corrupted seed, like genetically corrupted seed. And like, we see vines today, they can wrap around like trees that are already native, right? And then the vine will literally wrap itself around telephone poles, right? We've seen buildings. But this vine apparently wrapped itself around one of the native trees that was in the garden and basically corrupted it. But that seed that was planted by one of the fallen angels was genetically corrupted by Satan himself. But you don't get this in Genesis. And then the vine wrapped around itself around a tree, and then it became the tree of good and evil because it had been corrupted with the poison of whatever. But in the same book, it talks about it being a tree and also being a vine. So which is it? Is it a tree or is it a vine? Right? Apparently, it was both. It was a tree that a vine wrapped itself around and became like one thing. It's very odd. This is what we get from the ancient sources, though. But even ayahuasca is supposed to be a vine. Some say that the poisonous fruit that they ate of might have been a psychedelic that opened up their third eye or whatever, opened up their eyes to a world that they wasn't supposed to be revealed to them just yet. That's just speculation, though. I'm not entirely sure.
So Geo kind of hit a note there, kind of then. Divine. That's like, so the vine is like this idea of almost a connection between God and his people to an extent. That's trippy. I never even thought about the word divine having the word divine in it.
But yeah, so it says in both sources, it talks about it being a cluster of grapes.
Yeah, I read that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was just thinking because like when we say like the divine, or it's like a link to that like between the natural and supernatural, a vine in general, and then we say divine. It would be interesting to look at the etymology of that. And then also lying down with ayahuasca, it's like a vine that it's like it twists and turns around the tree, like it goes. It's like a big, like ayahuasca, the vine itself, like this really thick vine, like a woody vine that wraps up and goes around the tree.
Wow. Jesus declares himself the true vine, fulfilling Israel's calling and becoming the sole source of spiritual life. It's the spiritual grafting.
Wow. Yeah, so he's the true vine in juxtaposition to what other vine? Well, if you read the apocryphal text, it talks about the tree of good and evil being not only being a tree, but a vine.
It's also still a trip to me that we talked that one time how the word ayahuasca has Yah, Y-I-H, and it has Yahuwah, Y-I-H-U-A, in the word ayahuasca. Remember we talked about that one night, dude?
That's that came across my mind today too. I was blown away by that. I mean, I hadn't noticed it, even though it's right in my face.
I mean, there are people that combine Christianity and ayahuasca. The whole Santo Daime Church does, and there's other people as well. So that is a thing out there. But it's not everyone that uses ayahuasca. I don't think necessarily has a Christian resonance with it, but some do. So it's interesting.
Even if it's not Christian, it's still invoking the one true God, which is Yahweh. even if they don't recognize his only begotten son just yet, right? It is a doorway, into the truth, in my opinion.
We'd have to look where that word came from, though, because I think it's probably a more recent word. They probably didn't use that word like really long time ago. Because doesn't
you talking about ayahuasca?
Yeah, just that term. Like, is that?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah,
but if it's native, if it's part of their culture, and they've been saying it for thousands of years, who knows?
Well, there's that language, Quechua, like Quechuan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is derived from the Quechua language. So yeah.
I don't know what that language is. I have no idea.
Quechua. Basically, like it was, like the Inca.
Were the Inca already conquered by Spain? I think they were, or the Spanish. Or was it? Because I know you got. Yeah, I think it might have been before. Actually, the Inca was before.
Well, I was just mentioning the Inca because it's like connected to that land, and it was like the language during that time. But this is saying here that it was Quechuan is a distinct, unrelated, and endangered Yuman language. Yuman. Yuman, spoken by a small number of people in the lower Colorado River Valley of California and Arizona.
What? Wasn't expecting that.
Wait, that's saying those are two different things. So there's Quechua, which is the Incan language, and then Quechan is a distinct, unrelated, and endangered Yuman language spoken by a small number of people in the Colorado River Valley. That's what it says. Two different things. They're saying Quechua is the language of the Inca and so on. And then this other one, Quechan, or Quechan, A-N, is something different. But yeah, it's interesting, like what the roots of the Quechua might be as well.
Been hooked on researching some of these, not just some, but as many of these shamans as I can find. There's a couple of vloggers that have gone down there and kind of around them and have been interviewing them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard you guys know a lot about all this already, but they're aware of the negative spirits that can come in, or like the negative stuff. What do you guys think about that stuff? Not in a religious view, just like they all have their unique song to ward off evil spirits. Like they're passing along this unique song to their son if he's being a shaman, and it's like they play this and they can apparently tune to like to when you're about to really peak. So they're the song is tuned to help you stay calm, and it's so interesting. Like they're aware of this kind of spiritual vibe that they're cultivating.
Something came up on my feed the other day about a guy who was like the 41st subject, Dr. Rick Strassman's 41st subject for intravenous DMT or whatever.
Yeah.
But because I know he did multiple experiments. He did his initial experiments, which was like a dose, and then he tried it again later on with like a drip feed. But the guy said he was basically, most DMT experiences are like 17 minutes long. No, 8 minutes long. Excuse me, 8 minutes long when smoked. And then when you do ayahuasca, you might have like a 12-hour thing, but they come in waves, and it's not like the same thing as like actually injecting it. This guy injected it like clinical study, bro, and he was tripping for 5 hours. He said, "No, I gotta revisit it. I only saved it. I didn't get to revisit it yet, but I want to know what he's seen. I haven't heard any of that yet. I just know that he's tripped for 5 hours, like completely tripped for 5 hours. Not like how you mushrooms where it comes and goes. Like he was gone.
It's insane.
Yeah, I think with injecting it lasts longer than vaporizing it. Oscar, it's about 4 to 6 hours. It's like 4 to 6 hours for one dose, but you can actually you can be heavily saturated in DMT with ayahuasca if you do enough of a dose, for several hours as well. Although it's probably gonna be different than injecting whatever they were injecting, obviously, but there is an overlap of the DMT component. By the way, this is saying that Quechua language is it says it traces back as early as 2600 BC, long before the Inca Empire. So I think it's a really old language. But that's actually around the time of it's just this word ayahuasca. Like, is it, if it's Quechua and we're talking
that's awesome
2,500 years ago, like maybe it is connected somehow.
What?
Gio, I don't know if you've seen I've been posting these pictures in here. These are from what's called the Divine Tree from the Shang Dynasty, and I don't know. It's really interesting. It looks pretty trippy, actually. Like if you took something from this tree, maybe you're gonna see a story happen. Maybe you see like little things that tell stories or something. It's kind of suggested. You could look at the Han Dynasty tree that I posted above that. And it looks like there's a bunch of coins coming off the tree, and then there's, instead of leaves, like actual scenes happening on each branch. Like a branch is a timeline or something like that. Very interesting shit. I kind of feel like that there must be, since trees are so basic, that there must be like a underlying understanding of the whole tree thing before we ever get to Garden of Good and Evil, Knowledge of Fruit, and all that stuff. But I presume that this and such that also we've got like the banister vine. I'm seeing like in the relationships between these Chinese artifacts, they don't look that Chinese to me, guy. They look actually something very similar to South American stuff, Mayan, Incan, Aztec stuff like that. So it's interesting that you bring up that there's a vine connection with the ayahuasca. It's interesting that all this shit is very detailed, imaginative, character, like there's all kinds of design that doesn't have to be there. Not utilitarian. It's interesting. Thanks, guys.
Well, the migrations of the Americas started in Asia before they were, in my opinion, since the last cataclysm.
But just hold up. Like, we are told that it goes a certain kind of way, and we're told that Bronze Age happens certain places and not others. And yet here there are people with bronze when they shouldn't have had it. I'm wondering, did they make it there or was it brought there? Kind of wondering. And this city is interesting. Also, the Sanchendui site, because I've found artifacts that like kind of look like Babylonian artifacts too. Like a style or a motif was kept, a story was kept, so we keep the same picture. You know what I mean? Like maybe we'll change it over time, and maybe they do change over time. But that's what we're looking at here, right? Origins. Where does the vine come from? Where does it root, and where does it spread? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you good. I'm trying to find a picture. See if I still have it. I think it's on my PC at home. But yeah, I mean, the migration routes of man. We started in the Fertile Crescent or whatever, and then we made our way eastwards across the Bering Strait into the Americas. So before we had Inca, before we had Mayans, before we had any type of civilization in the Americas, they first existed in Asia. I firmly believe that.
Well, what about, when like E1 and New Perspective, they talk about moving the prime meridian 33 degrees. It ends up going through Africa there. Like, did we start in the center and go out from there? Do you think in the Middle East?
Well, yeah, it was around the Fertile Crescent, the Levant area, in my opinion. But they're trying to move it to like Egypt.
Wait, do you think all humans started there? You're saying, like literally the dawn, like the start of
since the last global or world reset, not global, but you know what I'm saying, world reset.
Okay, like after a flood, you mean?
Yeah, after the deluge.
Like, yeah, for sure. These types of artworks that were created in this place in China are some of the most advanced graphically that I can recall of any kind of world culture. And like even in our time, I think some of these things are highly rendered, especially the masks. They're pretty amazing, but they're all done in bronze and they're very large too. So these are like just types of craft like other people wouldn't have been doing. A lot of it's buried still. Like we don't have the whole picture of like what their society was like. But they're like I think the origin of they were doing bronze the first in China, which might mean that they might have been the first to take that bronze because people move around, right? So it's possible that they brought somebody brought the understanding of how to melt metals. You know what I mean? Don't you think? Like some people must have understood this and then spread it places and be like, "Yo, no, we're welcome for the solid. There's tons of metal around here. Have fun with it." You know? Don't you think?
And a lost art of finding the ore without modern tech, all that stuff comes into my mind.
No, yeah, for sure. But we got knowledge from above. So when it came to like making weapons or smithing metal and stuff, I think we were given that knowledge. And maybe it was through the psychedelic experience. A lot of people, they act like they receive something that they didn't come up with themselves, but it was given to them from the, what do they call it, from the like when what do they call the above?
The Akash.
Well, the Akashic records, but there's another word like a muse. Is that what it is?
What is it?
MUSE.
Muse is a concept from Greek stuff. I would say that that's different.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the word I'm looking for, but
I've also heard like the idea that like things are right in front of your eyes. If you look, you'll open your eyes and you can read shit in the air. That's called logos. I've heard that from some old people, some old guy that was a composer, and he had studied with a lot of people on these like kind of metaphysical concepts that come from like African drum music and shit like that. And I guess he's probably borrowing a little bit of that concept to where, yeah, like in the trance part of music, when we get into this kind of zone, that you might start to like envision things in front of your eyes that like aren't really there, that like help you continue this rhythm up. I don't know. It's sort of like where the dream consciousness starts to enter the waking existence. Is that like where we get inspiration from, or is that where the logos exists, or such and such? I kind of wonder, right? Because if we were totally logical all the time, yeah, we shouldn't really have like creative ideas. We shouldn't think of things, you know, when we're not supposed to. So where is it all coming from? It's not just like a reshuffling of the cards. Not every time. No, sometimes it's very difficult to pinpoint where an idea comes from. And then what is it like? Ultimately, are we really coming up with the ideas anyway? So don't we just need a god to pin these ideas on? Is God the scapegoat for our creativity?
I mean, I think there's some autonomy, right? There's like we have volition. Like we have like basically attributes that are considered divine. Like that's why it says that we were made in his image, because like God, we also have the ability or the capacity to form things, right, with our hands and bring things into our existence from our mind. Like we can think of something and create a blueprint, like a design, right? A blueprint, and then actually manifest it. That's a divine attribute. We take it for granted, because we grew up with it, playing with Play-Doh since we were kids. But think about it, like playing with Play-Doh, or I'm not Play-Doh.
Yeah, like a dog finds like a bone somewhere, and it's like, oh my god, I just invented bones. Where is this bone gonna go? I'm gonna dig a hole because I have hands and they're shaped like paws. So I'm gonna do the thing that I'm supposed to do with these hands, and I'm gonna just dig a hole, put my bone in there. Okay, now I'm just like a person. I'm just like doing things like a person. I'm a dog, I'm gonna go piss over here. We're divine in such that like we don't have paws and we're not just thinking about bones. We can grab things with our hands, not just our mouth. So I don't know, like we're definitely lifted up a little bit from the ground level, but we're still tied to a lot of earthly processes here. So you can't say that we're like divine in the image of or whatever, because does God have a bowel system? I wonder. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't need that stuff. You know what I mean? Maybe he's like, I'm a breatharian guy. I left food a while ago. I'm not sure. Am I George Carlin out here too much? You help me redirect.
No, yeah. No, those are valid questions.
I want to comment on he brought up, clearly like the creativity we have is not necessarily spawning just from us. I want to correlate this a little bit with the heart and the mind. Those are two fields that are overlapping, and that intersection point, what causes what I think is, what people call meditation, or like being able to create this syncing of the heart and the mind. This is from calming your body down, because your blood is basically sending pulses through this field, right? The overlap. Like if you look at where your blood flows through your heart, its position, where it's flowing up to your brain, the blood itself is pulsing at cycles. And the calmer you are, the closer you are to 60-ish cycles. And there's some interesting stuff with that 60 cycles and what Tesla found, in him tapping into some of the unique phenomena. So I think they've been copying that tech, or what our body does with our field. If you look into the CIA with the hemi-syncing project, some of this more modern stuff with astral projection, I think there's 100% something to that. When we calm our mind and we kind of act in a state of active waiting, our attention, if you can put all of your attention into attention itself almost, that's where that divine creativity comes in, and the mind's eye can start to present things. I think that was a good point.
I think it's just like flow. I think it's just like it's like fluidic. The whole thing is like if you're prepared to not like resist something, it can flow towards you and it can flow through you. It'd be an idea or some other thing that you might think of.
Yeah, and I kind of like try to normalize it sometimes. Like, okay, really, creativity is an expression of taking all these different things that are separate and they have results, and we can map that. I can physically see that in my mind. This apparatus does this, this thing does this, but I can put them together to create a creative output, right? With art, that's different. With engineering, that's different. To me, that explains this kind of traction-based creativity, right? But to me, we're almost approaching more of this like greater awareness. Like how do we get such massive breakthroughs, these larger things? It doesn't look explainable like that. It doesn't look like you can map all the traction points to fully explain creativity.
Like building on on complex system and being like, oh yeah, here's the final button for the car, guy. Now we can start it. It's interesting, but we're really only able to do like sort of like one thing at a time, or be like, yo, it goes to this whole other thing. We can't like think of every single screw, washer, nut on a car if we're an engineer, right? It's just too much information, right? So we only really pay attention to kind of peak information, I think. What's topical, what's been brought up. We don't really recall all of like fourth grade, if we think about a fourth grade concept, right? It might take us back there, maybe to some linkages, but we're not pulling the entire file, let's say, to look at it. So really, like what you could say your norm is your resting neural net, or some people say resting bitch face. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. Resting neural net is like what we have. That's like your basic quantifier of how you're intelligent. How you're intelligent, not like how much intelligence you have, but like how in the way that you are, you react, respond, learn, imprint. You know what I mean? All the way that people see you. All these things are part of that resting neural pathways that you have. So like it again is like a management of, if it's energy, it's kind of fluidic, or if it's whatever, that we're just managing these energies as gates, sort of, right? That our nervous system is sort of like a piping system for energy. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, but
yeah.
2 cups of coffee later, who knows?
Yeah, and like to me, this is like kind of decoding the idea of meditating, or why people link these creative breakthroughs to certain different flow states. Because this comes to separating yourself from that normal pathway you've already kind of trenched in. We have this neuro network that we build with our mind from the things we focus on every day, and it's almost like figuring out how to trigger that new pathway to form. And it's a familiar process if you do it over and over, I think. This neuroplasticity.
But interestingly too, like we're only one type of personality, only one type of mind ordering, so we only kind of become most of what we are. We never really become the full yin and yang of ourselves, if that makes sense. We're dominantly one thing, which is the alive part of us that makes this whole life that we have to account for with the other side. Do you know what I mean? Like we never finish the other side. Or maybe we do in the afterworld or something like that, but in this life we're always kind of like dealing with what yesterday made. So like and our own sense of self, right? So we never think about, well, let's say I'm really impulsive, I do all kinds of stuff like that. I'm not thinking about like, what am I doing with my 401k, what am I having for lunch tomorrow? I'm not thinking those things what the fuck so ever. They're incomplete parts that I'll never really render out. I'm actually like this, like I'm not a really good planner for certain things. Other things,
well, it's like, anyway. Yeah, your point. It's like the reflection cycle.
Nobody gets it all. Nobody gets it all, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're pointing out like the reflection cycle. Almost like, there's this mirror of ourselves we're kind of stuck with.
It's a mirror of ourselves, but we have to take care of ourselves. Like, or if you don't, I mean, that's your own problem.
Well, yeah, just connecting it like neurologically, because like you're pointing out like we're sponges when we're young, and we define this kind of neural net, the way we process information pretty well before you get to the point where you may discover this intuitive idea of, being able to choose to teach yourself neuroplasticity and to hold on to it. So I you know what I mean? It's like kind of built in. It's like this lucky, it's like a curse almost if you keep too much neuroplasticity. Like the world pressures us and molds us into picking like this socially acceptable, pattern matching machine. So
yeah, I think you sort of develop neuroplasticity maybe until, I don't know, your 40s. You're like pretty much still assembling life, even, just to understand it. Even though we're supposed to understand it when we turn 18, there's still like a whole, probably another 18 years where you're just dealing with 18 and fucking knitting that up together, let's say, in your mind. In all that time, we're still like learning to balance the equation of who we are, like whether you're some kind of sign, you're some kind of quality of personality that you've inherited. Both of these things like are not balanced, right? So like if I had the exact personality to balance the personality type that I am, then I would be able to respond to everything, right? And I think that in the aggregate, we try to build this out like over the course of a lifetime. Ways in which to kind of like handle ourselves and balance ourselves, but we wind up picking complementary aspects to help ourselves with. If we try to pick like destructive aspects, we'll probably self-destruct. But if we're trying to do longevity, then we'll be like, oh well, if I take like this skill set that this other person seems to have, I don't know why they see things the way they do, but I'll start to adopt some of these philosophies, even though they're not part of how I fucking think. Maybe it'll bring wisdom. Maybe I'll just follow these things because it makes sense, even though it doesn't really to me naturally. And then I think, yeah, wisdom books, philosophy, it's on the stepping stones to where religion gets to be like, yo, this is just a bunch of collected knowledge. Like, hook into it because it can help you out, kind of thing. That's kind of how I start to look at these these things.
Essence of try and fail. Getting good at failing makes you a lot better than just succeeding right off rip.
Like, there's a set amount of things that are not like occulted, like that are obvious, epistemological, things that just lie out there, like colors of things. It can certainly be like a unifier of for all groups, right? All classifications you later have might go back to color, because color is limited and it's unlimited, but also we can force it down to just the rainbow colors, right?
Yeah, to me, this highlights this whole
sense, I guess.
Well, I'll bring it back to the beginning. This all to me, this is all highlighting like what's not the creative, right? Like it's difficult to try where we started. It was difficult to explain like what is creativity, how do we define it separate as this new thing that comes into our mind, and then we kind of showed how like the ability to even decide to know what's new and what's not is kind of difficult depending on if you're really putting yourself in new environments and like creating neuroelasticity. I just wonder, like, to me, there's, in my own experience, I've had so many like little like epiphany moments. You know what I mean? Like I've researched so much stuff, and then it's like you find this common denominator. And to me, the creativity is that being able to sift through all the knowledge and intuitively pick what's important and what's not. And there seems to be this weird subconscious piece that can sometimes point you towards things. Like this happens so much more now that I think it's real. And I think it's kind of like a faith-based thing, but just knowing you're going to get provided the answers that you're looking for, there's something about the universe. It does not mess around.